Hello everyone, welcome back to another stream. Hope you're doing well. So, on last night's stream, we started off with Lebovitz lore, 10 questions from the base game solved in the Elden Rings DLC. Then we checked out Making Moog Matter by Pispaya, Moog's lore post Elden Ring DLC. Then we checked out Birdo Please's Let's Talk About the Delayed Attacks in Elden Ring. Then followed up with Mad Luigi's The Hornsent and the Dancing Lion Elden Ring DLC lore. And finished off with Zoli the Witch's How This Armor Started a Rumor. So, for tonight's stream, I figured we could start off with another video by The Discerning Tarnished with The Tragedy of the Divine Beast Dancing Lion. I always screw up this name. There's just too much going on with it. And then following that, I have one by The Center Tarnished with Elden Ring lore, The Original Sin Revealed in Marika's Ancient Past. And it talks about the original sin in the thumbnail. Then following that, we have Garrulous Goldmask's What Was Marika's Original Sin? So I figured have a little bit of a theme going on there. Then after all those, we could check out Hawkshaw's Lore of the Nameless, Scadutree Tower, and Messmer's Secret Alliance. So it sounds a little bit conspiratorial right there, so I'm a little bit skeptical, but we'll just wait and see. So, Jake Peterson's Clown Scum, nice to have both of you guys in the chat again. All right, so let's go ahead and start off with The Discerning Tarnished's Tragedy of the Divine Beast Dancing Lion.
I am sure the blood residue near the divine beast dancing lion's head went unnoticed by many when first entering the theater or boss arena. I missed it myself because I was captivated by the stunning design of the boss. The presence of the blood residue holds...
Yeah, the first time I played through, I kind of thought that the blood might have just been from the beast that I was fighting, which I mean, it might technically kind of be from the beast, but when you load back in the area, it's still there, which is kind of interesting. And then Renus Iris, welcome back to the stream.
A significant secret. In fact, there is more to it than meets the eye. This discovery adds a whole new layer of mystery and intrigue to the story concerning Marika, Messmer, and the Hornsent. And I can't wait to show you exactly what I have uncovered. So, stay tuned for an in-depth exploration of this fascinating revelation. But before we get into the video, there is one very important thing we need to take care of. The YouTube algorithm for my channel shows that more than 80% of the viewers have not subscribed to this channel. And so, if you want to help this channel and promote its visibility, please subscribe to the channel and don't also forget to share, like, and comment. Now with that said, let's get down to business.
The crime scene.
Earlier on, I spoke about blood residue, and this here is the blood I am referring to. Please let me know below in the comments whether or not if you noticed this residue of blood when you first battled the divine beast. Upon closer inspection, it seems evident that something or someone was dragged through the portions of the blood residue, leading towards the altar or shrine. Now, we find ourselves at a compelling crime scene, and we are ready to embark on a forensic audit of the mysterious events that took place. We have two tasks at hand. Our first task is to determine the source of the blood. And I have a theory that the blood may belong to the divine beast itself. When we first encounter the creature, it appears lifeless, with blood residue close to its head. However, the rest of its body hides more.
Yeah, this is actually kind of an interesting point, because if it was dragged it doesn't seem to have been dragged by the dudes walking it, or if it was dragged, it was going backwards than the way that it's oriented, because if its head is like facing towards us, that doesn't line up. And then Dave and Corn, welcome back in, and nice to see you again. Hell yeah, forensics. I dig it.
Once the divine beast is resurrected by the incantations of the Grand Dam, we see that there is even more of the blood residue. There is a second divine beast in the ancient ruins of Ra. Notice that this divine beast is alive and actively on guard compared to its counterparts we fight in the Bellerat Theater. All this makes me believe that this divine beast is lying in its own blood residue, and thus it was murdered by something or someone. The second and more critical task is to
Or is it that the blood is going the other way? Hold on, I want to try to look at that again. It seems like the blood should have been going this way almost, because you'd have it trailing from the blood splatters rather than to it. Or, yeah, because you would need to have the blood on the ground for it to get dragged that way. So let me think about that. That's kind of weird. Well, I'm no forensic analyst for a reason.
By something or someone.
The culprits.
The second and more critical task is to reveal the culprit or culprits. There might be countless speculations, but I believe we can narrow it down to two potential candidates. The first is none other than Messmer the Impaler. Messmer is one of Queen Marika's offsprings, who is in the Shadow Realm or the Lands of Shadow at the behest of his mother to purge the Hornsent. Many have theorized that Marika asked her son to purge the Hornsent because of the barbaric jar ritual that the Hornsent meted out to her people, the shaman. But that is a story I will explore in a future video. The DLC story trailer gives us a glimpse of Messmer's ferocious implementation of his mother's instruction. But there are two scenes from the trailer that relates to the task at hand. The first one is the scene where we see Messmer standing on what appears to be a balcony, which gives him a full view of the Bellerat settlement. What is even more intriguing is the partially visible stair rail to the right. This stair rail looks similar to the one close to the entrance to the theater where we fight the divine beast. The entire scene is reminiscent of the Bellerat area, albeit in its former state. So it is possible that Messmer at this stage was heading towards the theater to do battle with the divine beast.
Yeah, I like that little assessment there, and there's always the possibility it could have been after he fought the two sculpted keepers, Divine Dancing Lion, within the theater, and then he could have just like come out and gestured grandiosely as a symbol of victory or something like that.
Then we witness a scene in which a divine beast charges towards someone or something and is stabbed with a spear by one of Messmer's soldiers. I believe the divine beast was charging towards Messmer because it appeared to ignore the attacks from Messmer's soldiers. Perhaps it was conscious of the fact that Messmer was the commander of these soldiers and taking him out would end the war. Subsequently, we see Messmer conjuring flame, and what follows is the three divine beasts impaled.
Yeah, I guess I would need to review the trailer to see if there's continuity in the timeline between his first gesturing and then like the divine dancing lion fight type thing. Because then, if that were the case, then it could be before he walked in there, I suppose.
an act I strongly suspect Messmer committed. It is therefore plausible that the divine beast we encounter in the theater within Bellerat settlement is the same one that
I don't like this shot for a couple of reasons, because it doesn't quite line up this way in the game. Like, if you look from the divine, or not the divine tower, but if you look from like the theater upwards, you won't see the Scadutree. But I kind of forgot that Anir Elim or Belierot seems to be like crumbling up towards the Scadutree in this section of the trailer, which kind of always reminded me of that opening cutscene type thing in Final Fantasy X. Oh no, because the Spira, where Orin comes while Tidus is playing Blitzball, and then like when he steps into a puddle, the water starts flying up. And man, that was such peak like 2001, 2002, whenever that game came out. But anyway, good times. So yeah, now that I look at this again and thinking about that whole context of before the land was overshadowed by invasion, it does make me wonder whether or not Belierot itself, or not Belierot, but whether Anir Lim might have actually been sealed during the Crusade. For a while now, I've been like, well, I don't think that must have been the case, because when he burned Belierot, the tower was gone, but maybe he hid the tower and then burned Belierot. But then it's like, why go through all that trouble of getting rid of the lower township but leaving the upper portion just hidden? Why not just call it a day after you've hidden them all? It's a big question mark as far as lore research goes. And then Corrin always found it hilarious that the second divine beast is just prancing around his little arena. You'd watch that in a telescope like it was a nature video. Here we have two sculpted keepers doing who knows what all in the natural habitat of a Colosseum type thing. Anyway, it's not a Colosseum at all. Parthenon type thing. And then Renus was saying that maybe the divine lion limped towards the altar. The only thing about that with the blood stains would be that we don't have the drip marks to show that the blood was trailing towards the altar. It's the fact that they were like lines, which shows that they were dragged. So, I don't know. I'd have to look at it again.
confronted Messmer. I therefore propose that Messmer did not utilize the fire he conjured, but instead used his spear to fatally wound the beast. The beast would then have suffered a painful demise through bleeding.
I like the use of the cheat engine, but I feel like you should have put the lion dancer or Messmer in the lion dancer's arena,
Leaving behind the telltale traces of blood on the floor.
Right. So with this, it looks like the blood started here and then was dragged that way, rather than starting here and then like coming this way and then pooling after the fact. I'd expect to see more blood drops like this direction if it started this way, rather than a lot of the blood drops being kind of off to the sides.
The other intriguing suspect in this mystery could be none other than Queen Marika herself. This theory suggests that the divine beast met its demise prior to Messmer's arrival in the Shadow Realm. The game provides us with clues that the Shadow Realm is where Marika initially set foot in the lands between and ascended to godhood. Additionally, we are presented with hints of a seduction and betrayal, which continues to spark intense speculation within the Elden Ring community. What if, in her relentless pursuit of godhood, Marika was responsible for slaying the divine beast?
Wait a second. There is no tower type thing here. So the tower came later.
A revered creature within the Hunsent culture. It is conceivable that the Hunsent revered the divine beast as a deity and kept its location a closely guarded secret. However, Marika may have found a way to coerce a member of the Hunsent community, potentially the Grand Dame, into divulging the creature's whereabouts. With this information in hand, Marika could have orchestrated a clandestine plan to murder the divine beast, effectively stripping the Hunsent of their revered deity.
About that, I do wish we had more info with Godfrey, because it seems like that would almost be more up his alley, especially with the way that he kind of murks Sarash when it tries to come off of his back. But, yeah, I don't know.
Subsequently, she may have proceeded to the divine gateway to claim godhood and usher in the age of the Erdtree. This revelation certainly aligns with the seduction and betrayal hinted at in the game's lore. While both theories present compelling arguments, I find myself leaning towards the notion that Messmer was the one who killed the divine beast, especially considering the scenes depicting him impaling several of them. What are your thoughts on this? Do you believe the culprit was Marika or Messmer? I'd love to hear your insights, so please leave your comments below. I hope you have enjoyed joining me on this captivating journey. If you appreciate contents like this, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to my channel to stay informed about upcoming videos. Until we meet again, the Discerning Tarnished bids you farewell.
Alright, so that was a really good video, and his really small channel only has a couple hundred views. If you guys want to go and give him some support, I recommend checking out the video in the link. Well, yeah. So, I am really distracted by some of the stuff with the story trailer. Let me pull that back up.
And the betrayal.
Oh, is it still early? No, this is this part. Alright, so we've got them waging war. Right now he's pointing. Okay, so if there is continuity of the timeline here, then this might be before he goes and fights the lion in the next room, I suppose.
The tyranny.
Oh yeah, and so Renus is asking, was Ramana living in Bellyrat? I think this is supposed to be the Church of the Bud, and you're supposed to be able to see Bellyrat in the distance, although this might actually be the church itself, because like the dudes are marching, which is kind of weird. It is very interesting that they come here of all the places in the midst of their crusade, but I mean, I guess to be fair, a lot of the other Hornsent settlements have been burned down as well, like the Morth ruins have been burned. The place south of Bellyrat was also burned, so.
Of Messmer's flame.
Yeah, so I liked the Discerning Tarnish pointing out like the divine dancing lion fighting the little Messmer guys first and getting stabbed. And I did not pay super close attention to the continuity between these scenes, so it is like one continuous movement for that lion. This is so strange. Well, I was gonna say maybe that tower could exist, the like cupping one, but it would be way over this way. But then like the Scadutree shouldn't be oriented this way either. It does make me wonder when exactly the Crusade happened. Like whether this is like right before the Shattering or just sometime in between Marika and the whole Renala situation.
And so kindly Miquella would abandon everything.
Where is this side of Grace supposed to be? This is one where I just can't remember anything that quite looks like this. It almost seems like it should be Rao, like near the Rao base or something like that, but I don't think so.
His golden flesh.
I guess I could like cross-reference all of the crosses to see if there's one that matches up, but I just don't remember. Alright, so yeah, that's pretty much that. Because that's there now. So like, when we were oriented towards Belurot before, the Scadutree should not have been anywhere near it. Is that evidence that the land shifted later on? Well, even if they did, it'd still be annoying that we don't have this. Or is it, I mean, the not parallax, but the angle should have made this much smaller too. This trailer got me all kinds of messed up. And the other really annoying thing about that is, if some of these details in the trailer are wrong, then couldn't you argue that this stuff is wrong too, or like not as straightforward as it's presented? Man, I feel like the DLC's lore would be a little bit more straightforward without this trailer at all, almost, to some extent. This has got me so messed up. I feel like Quelaag, it's keeping me up at night. So that one's by Rao, it has to be. It does seem like Rao. Yeah, that OST does go really hard. And so just angles for the visuals. Well, it's not like normal angles. So I mean I just closed my thing. Hold on.
Peggy 6.
But that was it, wasn't it? So hold on. Where is this oriented from? Maybe I'm looking at Belurot the wrong way. So we've got this cliff, these towers. So are we off to the relative southwest? Or is this like the front gate? Well, no, it's going that way, though. I should do some sleuthing and actually take some visual comparison shots from in-game versus what we get here. But also, this thing is just absolutely massive, so it just doesn't match up for angles. So anyway. Nightbot already calling me up. The angles are weird. You just don't think we got to overthink it? Nah, man, this is the lore. We got to overthink it. That's what we do. All right. So yeah, that was a really good video. So let's go ahead and check out the next one with... That is not it.
Nobody. And I mean...
Why does it not go with the playlist order? Now we have Elden Ring lore, the original sin revealed in Marika's ancient past by the Center Tarnished. So... I tend to believe that the original sin is burning the Erdtree because we're kind of told that verbatim with like Ania's dialogue and Fire's deadly sin, or yeah. So anyway, let's see what he has to say about this. Hey, the Discerning Tarnished. We just watched your video, man. I should have pinged you. That it was my fault. But yeah, it was really good. I really liked the questions you brought to the table there. Oh, damn. So you just missed it all. We watched your most recent one, I think. The one about the mystery of the divine dancing lion. It's pretty good.
The very
original
fabric
sin.
of Elden Ring's universe is built from one simple principle: opposites, or duality. Naturally, these opposites create friction amongst themselves, a never-ending war of dominance that creates homeostasis within the universe. From cosmic elements like the 2 and 3 fingers, Erdtree and Scadutree, to the war between the ice dragons and fire giants, to alabaster and onyx lords, all the way down to the gold and silver scarabs. Everywhere we look within the universe of Elden Ring,
I think it's easy to overlook the furtive scarab, the one so easily forgotten, the Viridian one.
we find opposites. However, it didn't always seem to be that way. In fact, we know that one very specific event was the beginning of these warring opposites.
An affair from which gold arose. And so too was Shadow born.
The ancient history of the Lands Between was a place lacking any opposites, lacking any order. Now, I don't want that statement to be confused with chaos. A lack of order does not equal chaos. Because there's no element or definition of order, there cannot be its opposite. There cannot be chaos. You can't have light without dark. You can't have up without down. What I mean by lacking any order is that things just were. No order, no structure, just a nebulous concoction of everything. This is the beginning, the foundation, and the breeding ground for everything to come.
So I do think that is a bit of a false dichotomy based on the kind of understanding of order. Even one could argue that even nothingness or the lack of things is in itself a kind of order, and the only way one can discern chaos, well, chaos can't really exist in our ordered universe, so this is just kind of more of a not metaphysical, what's the word? Certainly not metaethical. Metaphorical, there, that's the word, holy crap. This is more of like a metaphorical argument here, because many people might think that the way that the leaves on a tree fall on the ground all around it might seem chaotic, because it just kind of makes an indiscernible mess. But each leaf falls in accordance to its nature, and it follows an ordered principle. And if there were no order whatsoever, then maybe the leaves would just, fly off into the sky or something like that. So to have nothing is still a kind of form of order, at least in my eyes. But that's, not really too important. And I just want to bring that up in case anybody's interested in that.
This is the crucible. Surprisingly, the crucible is one of the very few concepts within the lore of Elden Ring that...
And this is one issue that I do have with some of the Centered Tarnished arguments, where they just state things that are opinion as matter-of-factly things to consider. So, while I don't necessarily think he might be wrong about this, I don't think anything is ever super straightforward in the FromSoft games, and with their penchants for kind of retconning or changing things on the fly, it does make me a little bit hesitant to just accept things blindly.
That offers a plethora of information. Almost too much information. Like, we get it. It's where all life was blended together, the primordial form of the Erdtree, way in the ancient past. We get it. We're good here, FromSoft. You can move on to something else. We don't need 30 items telling us the same thing. How about we get 5 of these, and maybe 5 items talking about the Elden Beast, and some more information on the Glow-Eyed Queen, or something, anything about Radon and the Vow, anything. Anyways, there are a few item descriptions that basically give us all the information we need about the crucible. In an age long past, before this land was enshrouded in shadow, the vitality of the crucible flourished. A giant mass of intermingling crucible attributes, rumored to have sprouted upon giants, and is known as the Mother of Crucibles in ancient tower lore. Helm worn by Devonia, longest serving of the Crucible Knights, holds the power of the Crucible of Life, the primordial form of the Erdtree, strengthens aspects of the Crucible incantations. It is said that Devonia quested in search of the Crucible's origin, and departed from the lands of the Erdtree alone. With these few items, we can gather the following about the Crucible. 1. It's a place or entity or force of nature, whatever the hell it is, that lacks any order. The creatures coming from the Crucible contain all manner of strange, unorganized aspects: feather, horn, quills, tongue, breath, etc. Again, this isn't the same as chaos, because order is not yet a god within the universe, neither is chaos. Things just are. 2. The Crucible is the very ancient past, the beginning, the very foundation of life and everything we see in-game. It's almost like the Crucible represents the concepts prior to their form. 3. The Crucible had its origins in the Land of Shadow, as evidenced by Devonia's helm, which makes perfect sense. I mean, just look at the place and what the ancient cultures worshipped. So what happened that made this world, of just being and existing, to what we see today, a world of warring opposites? The short answer is Marika. The long answer is the following video, where we will be talking about the original sin and how it came to pass. By now, we all know Marika's shaman origins and the horrors that occurred at Bonnie Village. But what we don't know is how she rose to power, what is happening in this trailer, and the original sin that Mikola is trying to wipe away. Let's start with the original sin, as that will give us context to answer the other questions. I believe the original sin is Marika splitting herself into gold and shadow. I mean, just look at what she has to do to make that happen. In other words, I believe she splits herself into the qualities she accepts and those that she rejects. By splitting herself into accepted and rejected, she creates an entire world, an entire age predicated on opposites in their...
So this is an interesting idea, and I do have a lot of questions about that. And it certainly doesn't help that we don't really have much information, or pretty much any information, about what's going on in this part of the timeline in the story trailer, other than what you can see. So if he believes this is the moment Marika split herself, I'm curious why he thinks that's the sin, and he'll probably get into it, but I'm just, relaying my thoughts right now. And I can see why he thinks that would pertain to Mikola, but I'm also curious about how he would feel about Ymir's dialogue regarding that. And with this kind of viewpoint, I wonder how he feels about the cardinal sin of burning the Erdtree in relation to all these thoughts. And Global Sequence, welcome back to the stream. It always looks like she has a shadow tail when she's walking up the Fleshy Steps. And Fleshy Steps sounds crazy. Man, I just love this part of the story trailer, as well as other parts as well, but I really wish we had more in the game to go along with it, because I was so hyped when I saw this. Global said, it's kind of funny we have a glut of information about the primordial form of life, but like zero information about basically yesterday in the game. It's even worse when we can interact with characters like Ronnie and still get absolutely nothing.
Their unending war. I believe this is exactly what the two fingers represent, and why each Empyrean is given a shadowbound beast. The two fingers represents the dual nature of Empyreans. Even Miyazaki, in his official strategy guide interview, says that Empyreans have this dual nature. One of those is the nature that goes in the direction of their age. The other is everything that goes against that age.
I think one of the issues that Censored Tarnished had right here was he didn't make it entirely clear what was quoted versus what he's just saying or interpreting or something along those lines. Because I'm pretty confident the interview doesn't say anything about going against the order or going with it and everything.
Aspects of themselves that is not totally in line with their possible godhood, gets relegated and suppressed into their shadow, quote unquote gifted to them by the fingers. Just like the Erdtree has a shadow version where unwanted things are hidden and suppressed, so too do the Empyreans via their shadowbound beasts. Let's examine this further with the known Empyreans and their shadowbound beast. The first is Marika. She is all about life. She wants her kingdom to live forever. She becomes Marika the Eternal. That's a pretty simple one. The only thing that goes against that is death. Malekith was a shadowbound beast given to his Empyrean. Marika's sole need of her shadow was a vessel to lock away destined death. Malekith's only job is to keep death out of Marika's age. It's the only reason he exists. Up next, we have Ranni and Blythe. Ranni's age of stars is cold, lonely, full of fear and doubt, so naturally her shadowbound beast would be warm, kind, compassionate, proud, confident, and brave. Everything that goes directly against her possible age. There's another aspect of shadowbound beasts which is very important. EG tells us of this important fact.
So I do think that is a little bit reductive, because would one really argue that Malekith is the opposite of Marika, and then Marika's so smart with her 5D Megamind Galactic chess plays in sending the Tarnished away and then coming back, and because she's so smart, Malekith has to be that dumb? I don't think it's that zero sum of a game of like the characters' qualities between themselves and their shadows. And then we also have the oddity of Radagon to consider in relation to both Marika and Malekith and their kind of dual shadow relationship type thing. Hey, yeah, no problem. Discerning, it was much better. There was like one part, I think, in your just subscribe portion of the video where your music was slightly too loud for your voice. And I would also just recommend bumping up your voice volume in general, because it was a little on the low end. But that's kind of hard to know as you're doing it. So that, I don't know like what video recording software you use or anything like that, or editing software rather. But the general guideline is to try to get your voice to peak at around like -10 decibels. So I'll just like type that in the chat for you real quick. And then to have any secondary audio like -20 decibels lower than that, so around -30. And some of that can change depending on whether the background music has more bass or more treble in relation to your voice, but that's generally a pretty good rule of thumb. And then Global said, imagine if there was a stat called Curiosity, which did nothing for battle, but gave us additional speech options. I mean, like, okay, if you got more speech options during battle, which isn't what you said, I think that would also be really cool. Maybe like Lies of P style almost, New Game Plus. But those are one of those kind of things which I think sounds really cool on paper, but actually just becomes really annoying when it's fully implemented into a game, especially when stats are so valuable as they are. So if the choices for leveling up were between like secondary things like that didn't have anything to do with combat, and Curiosity was one of those things, I think I would be more in favor of having something like that. But to give like a parallel example of a game where more information was tied to what stats you leveled up, and it seemed cool at first, but kind of became annoying the more you like really tried to interact with it, was the way that Lords of the Fallen had some of their flavor text hidden, depending on whether or not you leveled up your Inferno stat or your Faith stat. What was the Faith thing in that game? Piety? I don't remember. So you either leveled up an entirely separate character for having all of the spell things to be legible, or you were just kind of boned and out of luck and looked things up on the internet. So it's I think flavor wise it's really cool, but practically it's just a bit annoying.
I presume you've spoken with Blythe? Very well. There is something you should know. The Two Fingers gave Blythe to Lady Ranni as a faithful follower. Her very shadow, incapable of treachery. But if Lady Ranni, as an Empyrean, resists being an instrument of the Two Fingers, the shadow will go mad, transforming from a follower into a horrid curse. But such is his destiny. In such matters, Blythe's own thoughts hold no weight. It pains me so.
And there was a little discrepancy in E.G.'s Japanese dialogue, where instead of saying his thoughts, he says that Blythe's will holds no fate, or no matter in his fate, or something like that. And I might need to think about that a bit more again, now with the additional context of the DLC and things relating more to gold and shadow and the will, I guess. So anyway.
But he must be neutralized. For Lady Rani's sake.
Here's where things get really interesting. Miquella and Melania. I believe Melania is the shadowbound beast of Miquella. There are a few clues given to us that point us in this direction. One is that shadowbound beasts are often referred to as the siblings of their Empyreans and are given to them at a young age. Malekith, Queen Marika's loyal half-brother, bore a blade imbued with destined death, and there was not one demigod who did not fear him. Not only that, but the shadowbound beasts are the loyal blades of their Empyreans, and we've all heard that famous quote a million times by now. Lastly is that Melania is the opposite of Miquella. Miquella is forever young and physically weak. Melania is forever dying and physically powerful. This exactly mirrors the other Empyreans and their shadowbound beast. Marika life, Malekith is death, Rani is cold and calculating, Blythe is warm and courageous. Now, this isn't a video about Miquella and Melania, but there's one last thing I want to point out. When we enter Melania's boss fight, she tells us that she has been in the deepest of slumbers. I suspect this is caused by Saint Trina, who we now know to be Miquella's other half. I believe he did this so his shadow, Melania, would not come after him, because he is defying the Two Fingers. His final act before departing to the Shadowlands was to put his sibling to sleep, not only to keep himself safe from her wrath, but also to offer her some sense of peace. As mentioned earlier, I believe that the Two Fingers are meant to represent the dual nature of these possible gods. One finger represents the Empyrean, the other its shadow. I believe this is why Empyreans are given shadowbound beasts at a young age. They are the vessel that gods. One finger represents the Empyrean to offer her some sense of peace. As mentioned earlier, I believe that Two Fingers are meant to represent the dual nature of these possible gods. One finger represents the Empyrean, the other its shadow.
So I wonder how he feels about characters like Mohg and Morgott sharing a Two Fingers, and what that means for Mohg potentially becoming Lord and Morgott just kind of being left to suffer, I guess, and die. But yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical of this claim.
I believe this is why Empyreans are given shadowbound beasts at a young age. They are the vessel that locks away anything that goes against their possible godhood. I believe this is why all Empyreans have one eye open and the other eye shut, because after this vessel of theirs, the shadowbound beast, seals away their rejected aspects of themselves, they are visibly scarred by this splitting.
And this is also kind of unfounded. We have Miquella having both eyes closed, so you might want to make an argument for that. And I guess at the very least, there is kind of the statues in Ordina having like a weird vein-looking like thing coming from his left eye, I believe. But yeah, I don't know. It sucks that we don't know whether or not Melina was something like the Glowmide Queen to say for certain whether she was an Empyrean. And then there's a bunch of weird arguments to be made about whether or not Messmer would be an Empyrean and if he should have had two fingers or anything like that. So, Corn says, and Marika just has no eyes. Well, I was also going to say, I don't know how fair it is to compare the current state of Rani to that claim about Empyreans, because her like real body died and we don't exactly even know what's going on with this ritual to keep her spirit alive the way that it is in possessing a doll and whatnot. And then, of course, Marika has some other stuff going on, and Melania has no eyes, and she was also called an Empyrean. So I feel like this might just be a little bit cherry picked to make a point right now.
Their rejected aspects of themselves, they are visibly scarred by this splitting. That scar is what happens to their other eye. It too, like their rejected aspects, is sealed away, suppressed. I believe Marika was the very
And then if he does want to make the Melina claims, and he doesn't have to do it right now, obviously, it would also help to explain what he thinks goes on with the Frenzied Flame ending when Melina comes back to haunt us, where her one eye becomes gray and the other becomes gloomy, for lack of a better term. So, right. Iron Lung and Galaxy Dragon. How's it going, guys? Welcome back in.
aspects is sealed away, suppressed. I believe Marika was the very first person to do this, the original. The sin that the entire Elden Ring universe is now predicated on. I'm sure by now you're asking yourself, hey, CT, what was all that crucible talk about earlier? Well, this brings me to Exhibit B of this story. Recall that the crucible lacks order. Not only that, but Marika herself wasn't always this way. Secret incantation of Queen Marika, only the kindness of gold, without order. I suspect that the crucible was this way because the very concept of order had yet to reach the lands between, which means the Elden Beast had yet to reach the lands between. Order is defined as the arrangement or disposition of people or things in relation to each other.
I don't really have too much to say. I'm trying to let that sink in a bit more because I am curious about what he thinks of the story trailer and Marika's gesture and what that means for order and everything like that. But
another way to think about it is that for things to be orderly, they must have its opposite. It is what gives things context in relation to each other. Like I said earlier, there is no up without down, no heat without cold, no life without death. Without darkness, the very concept of light would not exist.
And I understand where he's going for with this, but I think his statement is not, I don't want to say consistent, not congruent with his premises, where he's claiming one thing, but what I think he's actually claiming is that disparity, or wait, what he's effectively making the claim is that disparity equals order, which I don't necessarily agree with, because I would say that chaos is not order, and chaos is not necessarily like the opposite of order, because order is just kind of what it is. And that's kind of a terrible way to phrase things. But going back to what I said earlier in the stream, even a universe without like anything whatsoever is still kind of an ordered one, due to the fact that nothing is going on. Like, if things are just sprouting up randomly, would it be an ordered universe? Would it be a chaotic one? I mean, I think that's just kind of up to perception more than anything else. So I do think he's trying to say effectively that there is no order without disparity, and I'm not sure I would agree with that. And then Iron Lung asks, is spirit tuning how Marika got Hugh to Smith forever? Maybe, if you think of Marika as a bit of a spirit bender in a certain sense, that could be like part of the curse that she placed on them. And then he says, order in Elden Ring seems more synonymous with someone's control instead of things existing as opposites. Yeah, and that's another good point to make. The distinction between like the order as symbolized by the Elden Ring versus the literal concept of order versus something else entirely, like putting things together.
By providing opposites, you provide context and relation. You provide order. With that in mind, let's look at the trailer one more time. Marika reaches into something fleshy, something more than likely at least related to the Glowmite Queen. Out of this thing, Marika pulls out golden threads and creates her Elden Rune, the Rune of Life. The only way to get life out of something, like mentioned above, is to remove death. I believe what we are witnessing is Marika splitting her
Hold on, let me reread that. Or watch that.
of life. The only way to get life out of something, like mentioned above, is to remove death.
So I'm trying to reconcile this with his claims that he doesn't think the Elden Beast arrived. So maybe something got a little bit lost in the translation there between his statement earlier and what's going on now. And so he's saying that this period is not ordered. Okay, I'm following that. Well, yeah, I guess conversely, if he's saying that the before times were not ordered, does that imply that they're a chaotic time? I feel like he's trying to say that it's a neither situation, but I would disagree with that premise, I suppose. And then, hey, Mortis, nice to see you again. I kind of thought you were Nightbot for a second. And then Global said, in your mind, order and chaos are opposites in the way that yin and yang are opposites. One will always contain an element of the other, which are the contradictory elements found in each. So I just kind of don't want to touch that right now. Like, nothing against what you said. I just don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
I believe what we are witnessing is Marika splitting herself into life and death, into Marika the Eternal, and the Glomide Queen who wields destined death. Now, all this is happening in a realm that we are not able to glimpse into, the psychological realm. Just like we don't see Ranni seal away aspects of herself into Blythe, we don't see Marika sealing aspects of herself into Malekith. It is true that Malekith seals away destined death, but it was Marika who did the splitting, albeit at the behest of the two fingers. By splitting herself, Marika in that moment creates opposites, the very first opposites, life and death. And by creating opposites, she also creates the very concept of order. She becomes the god of order.
And this, I feel like he's trying to get into too much of an abstract subject, is just kind of contradicted by the literal acts that we see preceding it, in that she's literally walking up a staircase of corpses, which implies death exists to some degree. So I think the Senator Tarnished might have had a better argument if he brought it back first and then tried to explain things in more of a metaphorical way than a literal one, because this isn't helping his case, I don't think. And then Paisan, nice to see you again.
Looking back at that moment in the trailer, we can see these events take place. Marika splits herself, creating opposites, gold and shadow, life and death, which ends up becoming the lands between in the Erdtree, and the land of shadow in the Scadutree. She ascends the steps of the divine gates, announcing her godhood, an age of order. The Elden Beast crashes into the lands between, and that's when we get the gust of wind, the Elden Beast soundtrack, and the Elden Beast roaring in the background.
All right, so let me think about that, because that does answer some questions, but not sufficiently, I think.
Age of order.
So, hold on. She creates her age, and then the Elden Beast lands. Yeah, I don't buy that, because we're told that the Elden Beast would go on to become the Elden Ring. So, if she's making a life rune and a death rune, and the Golden Order was created upon removing the rune of death from the Elden Ring, then you're removing something from something which shouldn't exist in the lands between based on this time frame here.
Elden Beast crashes into the lands between, and that's when we get the gust of wind, the Elden Beast soundtrack, and the Elden Beast roaring in the background. Marika literally created the concept of order by splitting herself into opposites, into gold and shadow, into life and death. I have a suspicion that the person we are actually seeing in the trailer is the quote-unquote birth of Godwyn the Golden, and the sealing away of the Glomide Queen. But that needs more time to cook in the lore oven. To reiterate, I believe that Marika...
And then the other thing that I've been waiting to say is, if he thinks this is when the Rune of Death was removed or sealed or whatnot, then how does he reconcile all the talk about the Golem-eyed Queen being defeated by Malekith? I think this just doesn't align with the text of the game that we've been given so far, unfortunately.
Was seduced into godhood by the two fingers. I believe the betrayal was the betrayal of herself because she locks away part of herself within her shadow. In doing so, Marika creates the first sets of opposites, life and death, gold and shadow. I believe these two concepts are represented in Godwyn the Golden and the Golem-eyed Queen, as well as the Erdtree and Scadutree, the Rune of Life and the Rune of Death. In this moment is the planting of the Erdtree seeds, and because they are mirrors of each other, this is also the conception of the Scadutree. By creating the first set of opposites, Marika invokes the greater will and births and or becomes the god of order, aka the Elden Beast. Remember, you can only have order when you have two things that have relation to one another.
So I'll let this one slide because I think him saying this invokes the greater will can give people the impression that would be the first time that the greater will might, interact with the lands between. But there is always the possibility that the meta stuff could have happened. The greater will could have gone silent, and then Marika could have picked up the phone and gave it a call, and it could have answered again with the beast. Pete's here, so yeah.
I talk about this concept in detail in my Elden Beast, Elden Ring, and Greater Will video, which you can find in the description below. Now, I know a lot of you are screaming or typing in the comments right now saying that the Elden Beast comes way before Marika, and we have proof of it. There's an ancient Elden Ring and Fair Missoula, and stuff happened before the Erdtree and Marika. But stick with me here. We know that Fair Missoula was struck by a meteor long ago. We know the Elden Beast, who is also the Elden Ring, was sent via a shooting star, aka a meteor, long ago. We know that Marika's godhood gave birth to gold and shadow. We know that ancient dragons have gold imbued within their scales, which is why the dragon cult can be practiced in Lindell. The worship of the ancient dragons does not conflict with the belief in the Erdtree. After all, the seal and lightning itself are imbued with gold. We know that Marika is the spiritual side of her union with Radagon, while Radagon is the physical side, as evidenced by their source seals. We know the Elden Beast has the same wound in its belly where Marika is wounded. We know that the Elden Beast only does incantations as a way to fight and uses Radagon as the physical sword, just like how they are used in the game. One spiritual, one physical. We know that Marika is a god, and when we defeat the Elden Beast, it says God defeated. It is undeniable that Marika and the Elden Beast are interconnected. Now, does this mean that they are the same exact being? I don't know, but they are connected. Whether Marika summoned it, created it, is possessed by it, whatever, they are unified. Probably the most obvious thing, which for some reason no one ever mentions, is that right below this ancient Elden Ring depiction is a young girl with 2 braids praying while being surrounded by 3 wolves. To me, a clear illustration of what we just witnessed in the trailer. A separation of gold and shadow, of order and chaos. If Fair Missoula is stuck in time, in the ancient past, and this is the depiction of what the Elden Ring looked like in that time, and we have Marika there, that proves she is ancient. She is here from the beginning. You wouldn't go to a museum of ancient Egypt and in the same display case have 2 very separate things unrelated to each other. No, they are related, showing the same thing from the same time. What this collective art is showing is the emergence or splitting of order and chaos, the Erdtree and Crucible, gold, and shadow. We know that chaos is represented in the number 3. We know that wolves are shadows. We know that the Erdtree comes from the Crucible. The Crucible is the primordial form of the Erdtree. We know that the Erdtree represents the age of order. These 2 things, the statue and the Elden Ring, show us one clear story, the very birth of opposites, and thus of order. We know that Marika started the Erdtree. We know that the Elden Star's incantation is the most ancient of those derived from the Erdtree. The Elden Star's incantation also...
Alright, so I'll just be frank here that I kind of hate this form of argumentation. This is kind of like the quintessential Pepe Sylvia conspiracy board type thing where you start with one link in a chain that has a potential incidental connection with something else, and then you just keep hopping from point to point in a way that's almost like a Gish Gallop, where if you try to address one thing, it kind of doesn't matter because it's already moved on to another point. And to say whether or not that statue is even Marika to begin with also brings up a lot of questions about the shaman's village's relation to Farum Azula and the beginning of time. Now, this doesn't mean that the two aren't necessarily compatible by any means, but it does leave these questions unaddressed, and they might be worth more consideration rather than just accepting each point as fact, which is just, I just kind of hate that style of lore theorizing. So anyway, yeah, Galaxy was asking, are we sure that's Marika? Mortis is confused. And then Natsu said, one interpretation of the original sin in the Bible is that it represents the creation of dualistic thinking with humans, separating everything into good and bad, cause and effect, self and other, etc. So you think he's onto something, but he's assuming too much. Yeah, and that's kind of one of my problems with the Center Tarnished, is that he might have some interesting ideas here and there, but I think the way in which he comes to his conclusions tends to be kind of flawed, and just kind of makes me sad that they aren't a bit tighter theories overall. And then Diemo, nice to see you again. Just want to add that time discrepancy in travel must be revisited. It might be, but yeah, I just don't want to have to deal with that right now in the context of this video. And then Paisan is in the camp that thinks people overthink the crap out of that statue. We don't have enough to make a conclusion. And then Paisan thinks, in your opinion, he gets way too hung up on Jungian analysis. So I was going to give him a pass, and mostly he's kept his power level in check by not referencing Jung directly, despite like having the shadow stuff and the dual stuff. So I'll give him a pass for this video because it really hasn't been in the forefront, but I tend to agree in general. All right.
Also mentions the Elden Beast, which connects the Elden Beast to the Erdtree. This legendary incantation is the most ancient of those that derive from the Erdtree. It creates a stream of golden shooting stars that assail the area. It is said that long ago, the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring. Let's run this in reverse and see if it makes sense, with the end goal being the Elden Ring. Okay, to get the Elden Ring, you need the Elden Beast, which turns into the Elden Ring. To get the Elden Beast, we need order in the world. To get order in the world, we need opposite.
Already there, I feel like we have a, what's it called? A non sequitur. Like, this doesn't follow that. So even though, like, you might literally need order for the Elden Beast to arrive, that's kind of irrelevant based off of the current framing of the argument. And it really has no relation, I think, to what just came before. So I'm going to back up so that way we're all on the same track as he goes through this thought experiment.
Which connects the Elden Beast to the Erdtree. This legendary incantation is the most ancient of those that derive from the Erdtree. It creates a stream of golden shooting stars that assail the area. It is said that long ago, the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring. Let's run this in reverse and see if it makes sense, with the end goal being the Elden Ring. Okay, to get the Elden Ring, you need the Elden Beast, which turns into the Elden Ring. To get the Elden Beast, we need order in the world. To get order in the world, we need opposites, which were not present prior to Marika's ascension. Remember, the Crucible is a place that just simply is. There's no order, no chaos. And Marika comes from this time. To get opposites, we need one thing to fracture into two totally different halves. The entity that fractured into two opposites, that's Marika. The law of causality and the law of regression put into practice proves that Marika has been around for a very, very long time.
And this is just so bad, quite frankly. It's so bad. This is pissing me off, honestly. Like, if you just stopped and thought about, like, okay, well then where did you get Marika? Did she not have parents? Maybe he thinks she's like a jar creation. But I mean, just to say that there's no life and death, he's just arbitrarily saying that things are ordered and not really substantiating them, other than all in the service for this argument, which just feels disingenuous at this point. I'm disappointed. So anyway.
All that there is came from the one great. Then came fractures, and births, and souls. But the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake. And so, what was borrowed must be returned, melted all away with the yellow chaos flame, until all is one again.
That's right. I believe Marika is the one great, at least in a microcosm sense of things, meaning that the fracturing of the one great happens on a galactic scale as well as an individual scale. Since the time Marika fractured herself and created the very idea of opposites, they have been warring. Everywhere we look, this duality exists. The entire world is built from this original sin. The Lands Between is quite literally the place between these two opposites, a battlefield for their ceaseless struggle, a place between accepted and suppression. Those who get
Well, that's a theory, I guess, if we want to be generous with that term. So here's the thing about that. I don't really care if somebody wants to make the crackpot theory that Marika is the one great. That's all well and good on its own. But to tie it to all of the stuff relating to duality and whatnot just feels just too disingenuous for me to even pretend to try and support, because in his own estimation, he says that the two fingers is supposed to represent the duality between Lord and Empyrean. We're told that Marika's an Empyrean. She's supposed to have had a Lord with Godfrey and whatnot. The two fingers may have been around in the creation of the Erdtree. That's all arguable. But the fact that there were two fingers to begin with before the Erdtree shows that there must have been some idea of order or duality by the Center Tarnished's own arguments. This is just a farce of a video, and I'm kind of disgusted.
to stay in the golden light of the Erdtree, and those relegated to the Shadowlands. Everyone born under Marika's godhood is born of this sin, of this mistake. Gold and shadow, fire and ice, faith and science, order and chaos, inner god and outer god, Erdtree and Scadutree, love and hate. Whether it's the Frenzied Flame or Miquella's quest, unifying these opposites and creating a sense of wholeness is the only true way forward. It's the only way to rid the world of the original sin, of the mistake. Both Ranni and Miquella seem to have understood this mistake and attempted to undo it. But Ranni made a fatal flaw. Sorry, Ranni Simps, plug your ears. Ranni kills her shadow. Actually, we do it at her request. That doesn't mean she didn't love Blythe or didn't care for him, but she remains fractured. She remains half of a whole. To fully undo the original sin, one must embrace and heal their shadow. They must embrace the whole of it. A video on the endings and what they represent is in the pipeline, so be sure to subscribe to not miss it. Before I end this video, I want to quickly touch on Miquella's quest to bury the original sin and embrace the whole of it. To be whole, one must embrace their shadow. Miquella wants to embrace the whole of it. Compassion for all. He's not trying to get rid of order, but is trying to heal the malevolent nature of it. We talked about why he gets rid of his flesh in my Radagon's origin video, but why does he get rid of his love? If he has love in his heart, then he must have hate in his heart as well. You cannot have one without the other. Love and hate are no different than accepted and rejected.
And I disagree with that premise as well, but I don't really want to get into that. And going with his whole shadow argument, I feel like he's forgetting his line about millennia being his shadow in relation to this. So if he wanted to be consistent, I wish he would have at least brought that back into the focus right now.
So he makes the ultimate sacrifice because there is no room for hate in an age of compassion. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving it a like and subscribe to the channel. These scripts and videos are flying off the page and there are lots more to come, including Marika the Shaman, Mikola's Quest for Wholeness, and the endings explained.
All right, so I feel like I've given the Center Tarnished as fair a shake as I can with multiple videos, but there's just been a consistent track of this where I just don't want to interact with this channel at all. So sorry guys, if you like his videos, I kind of can't stand them, so I'm not going to be reacting to his stuff in the future. So Raven's Poetry 333, welcome on into the stream. Throne 6810, nice to see you again. And yeah, sorry for being so negative. And so it sucks. I kind of hate this when I feel like all I have are complaints. So anyway, hopefully the next video will be a nice change of pace with Garrulous Gold Masks. What was Marika's original sin? So maybe we'll get a different take on things here.
Hey, thanks.
All right. Oh yeah, so I did go ahead and share the Center Tarnished video if you guys want to like it or, you know, give them some support where I have given them hate. So, all right. What was America's original sin? Elden Ring lore explained by Garrulous Gold Mask.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. Today I want to discuss one of the most important events that happened in Elden Ring, Marika's original sin. I'm going to make the case for why Marika's desire to ascend to godhood and her following the ritual and the secret rite scroll was her original sin. According to the Remembrance for Messmer, we learn that Messmer was hidden away in the realm of shadow, keeping company with the original sin and a hatred that would not be confined. Keeping company with implies that Messmer is in close proximity to this original sin, so I think it makes sense that the original sin is also hidden away in the Shadowkeep, and if that's the case,
yeah, so this is something that I've been reconsidering as of late because I thought the original sin was probably more of a reference to the kindling within him. But after talking to some folks on the Discord, I realized that it could be meant in a more disambiguated sense in that being with the original sin and being is all being tied to being hidden within the realm of shadow. So there's a large umbrella which could feasibly tie into that quote right there.
The best candidate would be the secret rite scroll. My strongest piece of evidence that connects the original sin to the secret rite scroll comes from the Christian doctrine of original sin, but let's put a pin in that for now. The connection between the sin and the scroll is backed up by a very interesting and subtle difference between the English and the Japanese.
Ooh-wee.
See, there is a very specific kanji for the term original sin, but Messmer's Remembrance doesn't use that, and we know that FromSoft is familiar with that kanji, since that was used to describe Aldia as the scholar of the first sin, or as Loki put it, the researcher of original sin. Instead of using the kanji for original sin, the Japanese in Messmer's Remembrance can be translated along the lines of the sin of the beginning, and this is a direct link to the opening lines of the story trailer.
Mikula.
Alright, so just to give a little bit of context about the scholar of the first sin, I honestly really don't blame them at all for going with the localization choice of saying the scholar of the first sin, because you avoid the potential controversies which could come across with inadvertently implying that Dark Souls 2 is about Christianity by saying the scholar of the original sin, because it would make it potentially sound more Christian coded than it may have meant to have been. But for what it's worth, it may have been meant to be Christian coded, so there is certainly an argument to be made that they should have just kind of stuck with calling it the scholar of the original sin, because that is kind of what the Japanese is saying literally, since it does use the same kanji which is used for the concept of original sin in Catholicism and whatnot. Too bad for them, because DS2 is his Bible.
The kind spoke of the beginning.
I think this is a great example of Elden Ring being a bilingual text. Gamers in the West have a clear allusion to a Christian theological concept, while Japanese gamers have a clear connection to Marika at the Gate of Divinity, and both translations are necessary to fully understand what's going on. And while you could try to have a translation that would try to convey both meanings, it would end up sounding very clunky and repetitive, like the original sin of the beginning. Now, the secret rite scroll is one of the most important items.
I might have tuned out a little bit too much because I'm not following what he's saying there. Whoopsies. I'll just let it go.
In the game for lore hunting, since it explains how both Marika and Mikola became a god. According to its description, this is a scroll made of white tree bark. Few can decipher the scroll, which describes the secret rite of the Divine Gateway, said to be found at the tower enshrouded by shadow. A lord will usher in a god's return, and the lord's soul will require a vessel. So to recap, to perform the secret rite of the Divine Gateway, you need 3 components: a vessel, a lord, and a god. When we fight Mikola, Mikola is the god, Radahn is the lord, and Mohg is the vessel. But as Ansbach tells us, this ritual was also performed by Marika.
The Tower of Shadow houses a divine gateway. A well-kept secret it was, but the gateway was once the birthplace of a god we know all too well.
And I think we saw this in the story trailer. More specifically, I think the secret rite scroll is a variation of the process of divine invocation used by the Hornsent. A key part of Hornsent culture was calling.
Alright, so I do wish Garrulous Goldmask added a little bit of time in between some of his thoughts, so that way they could settle in the audience's mind a bit more before just jumping into the next one. So yeah, going back to whether or not Marika performed the same rite as Mikola, I have many questions about that, and that's one of the parts of the lore of the DLC which doesn't sit super well with me for a couple of reasons. So we do have the weird trichotomy to consider between Marika, Godfrey, well, I guess even more with Horalu and what's his face, Sarash. So was Horalu the vessel, the Godfrey the soul, or was Sarash the soul? Like, even setting that stuff aside, we also have the oddities to consider between Marika and Mikola's ascension of divinity / lordship, with Mikola having abandoned Trina, but we don't necessarily know if Marika truly abandoned anything else when Radagon came into the equation. So while there's the triumvirate between Mikola, Radahn, and Mohg, we don't exactly have that with Marika to quite the same degree, unless one wants to make the argument that you would have Marika, the Elden Beast, and Radagon? Or maybe the ordering can change. Like, maybe Marika's body was the vessel, and then Radagon tried to become the... Well, Radagon was the Lord, and the Elden Beast was the god? Maybe that works. I like parts of that idea that Radagon could have usurped, like, divinity to some degree, but that just doesn't match up super well with the story trailer. It also doesn't help that we see Marika before she transforms into Radagon in the boss cutscene. So, anyway. Hey, Moterian, how's it going? It's been a minute. Where does that gate lead? Just thinking out loud. So one of the funnier ideas that somebody had brought up, I think in one of my comments, was maybe this is the opposite side of the Gate of Divinity, and like this is the side that Mikola comes from, and like where we fight Mikola is on this side of the arena. So I don't know, but good question. And then, hello, goodbye, nice to see you again. Does anyone know if you can loot the candles from the Hornsent? The weapon? No, we cannot, unfortunately. Nor, like, their little, dagger type things. And then he says Horlu is just that guy and can be a lord's vessel without a corpse or the Hornsent aesthetic. And you're serious. I mean, you might be right. And so it's because of stuff like that, which really leaves me scratching my head in relation to this supposed divine secret ritual, which may have allegedly been followed by Marika, because the math ain't mathin' for me in almost any of these scenarios. And Paisan always thought this was the other side we don't see in the game. It's definitely a good idea. I don't know how valid it is.
Invocation used by the Hornsent. A key part of Hornsent culture was calling on different divine beasts like lions and birds. There's also the Horned Warrior Ashes, which state that in the tower, these warriors and their weapons both are spiritual vessels. We also get to see divine invocation in action in the opening cutscene for the Divine Beast Dancing Lion boss fight. Fun fact, the Hornsent Grandam can have different lines if you kill her beforehand. So in the Hornsent culture, when a warrior performs divine invocation, they become a vessel for that power. If you wear the best helmet in the game and talk to Horny Granny, she says,
"Oh God,
pure vessel of the sacred beast. After an eternity of the mind, our voices have at last reached the heavens, as evinced by thy gracious arrival."
But Marika was able to invoke a beast that was much, much more powerful, the Elden Beast. In the story trailer, the music is deliberately reminiscent of the Elden Beast OST.
An affair from which gold arose.
While the final shot reminds me a lot of both the Elden Beast Arena and the Memory of First Grace we see in the menu. We even got a small clue in the base game, since at the Queen's Bedchamber in Leyndell, we can see scrolls made out of white tree bark, kind of like the Secret Rite scroll. But
oh, that's a good catch. I haven't gone back to the bedchamber to double check, but yeah, I only ever really remembered seeing the grave tablet things, the Moses tablets, and I didn't remember these things at all, so I definitely appreciate that.
we can see scrolls made out of white tree bark, kind of like the Secret Rite scroll. But there is a crucial distinction between Marika and Miquella's ascent to godhood. Initially, I believe that instead of being the god, Marika was the vessel, and the Elden Beast was the god. See, when you defeat the Elden Beast, God Slain shows up, yet Marika is still around, though it's unclear if she's still conscious or even alive. But while
I guess I would need to comb back through the text of the game, because I may have been taking Ania's dialogue for her saying that Marika is a god in truth for granted, and I don't necessarily disagree with the idea that the Elden Beast was the god, because we get the remembrance of the Elden Beast, which says that it was a god that should have lived a life eternal. But then there's always been that question of how much of this is meant to be taken literally versus metaphorically for a reference to either Marika or Radagon or any combination of the three of these beings.
Marika started out as the vessel, thanks to the ritual, she eventually became a god. After all, Marika is called a god multiple times throughout the game.
Slay.
Let me think about that. That could potentially, maybe, make sense if you are a believer of the late Ascension theory, in that perhaps the Erdtree and stuff was already around if Marika was the vessel of the Elden Ring. And then, could she have taken the Elden Ring and then tried to ascend fully to godhood? Yeah, this is kind of blowing my mind a little bit, that Marika's age could have started without her necessarily being a legitimate god in the current sense of the term, and then she could have truly become a god later on, potentially with Radagon. I will need to really think about that and stew it over a bit more. Now, I don't know if that's exactly what Garrulous Goldmask is trying to argue specifically, but I think his framing just kind of like steers me into thinking about this in a different direction, perhaps. And so, yeah, this will probably require a pretty strict combing over the text again, which honestly, it's actually pretty fun and exciting. So, yeah. Hey, Aaron. No, this is not Signalis. As I said, it will be tomorrow. So I've already got the stream queued up, and it was in the announcements, my mans. Sorry, you got jebaited. But welcome back to the stream.
The god Marika, who cursed us all.
As Enya tells us,
Queen Marika is the vessel of the Elden Ring, carrier of its vision, a god in truth. But after the Elden Ring's shattering, she was imprisoned in the Erdtree.
All right, I just might fast forward through the Enya dialogue because it's just kind of louder than his voice and in one ear, and it's really annoying me.
Heavy.
All right, hold on. Okay.
God and the vision's vessel.
And as Corvin tells us,
the Golden Order is founded on the principle that Marika is the one true god.
And like so much of Elden Ring's lore, Marika, being a vessel of the Elden Ring, was once again very literal. I think this is a deliberate parallel to the jarring truth we learned about Marika and the Shaman village. In other words, Marika was the jar. I'll also point out that the Elden Beast...
Got him, where you're a lot farther from the mic this time around. Why is the transparency so wonky this time around? It's annoying me. Here we go. Nope. Don't need that. So it says 0, but it's still there. Anyway, I don't know why it's so different on this video. Let me try pressing a bunch of buttons. It's doing nothing. Okay. Anyway, I tried. And then James Lang, nice to see you again.
Beast was the living incarnation of the concept of order, and the minor Erdtree spell, which was a secret incantation of Queen Marika, has only the kindness of gold without order. So I think Marika visited her village one last time to pay her respects, right before she left to become a vessel for the Elden Beast. And Marika, exuding the...
I like that idea, but one of my questions is, then why does she have the minor Erdtree incantation before becoming the vessel? To me, it almost seems like this might have been the victory lap memorial to her hometown after she had completed her victory, but who knows?
Kindness of gold is also a clear parallel to Mikola.
I'll make the world a gentler place.
For more insight into Marika, let's turn to the concept of original sin, derived from the Book of Genesis, and can refer to both the original sin committed in the Garden of Eden, as well as the consequences of that sin.
Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her. And he did eat, and the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together. And the Lord God said, Behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand, and take also of the tree of life, and eat and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden.
The term original sin can have subtle but very critical distinctions between Christian denominations. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to focus on Augustine, since he popularized the doctrine of original sin, and he was also a highly influential saint in the Roman Catholic Church. In addition, the first Christian missionaries who reached Japan were Catholic, and as anyone who's played Dark Souls or Bloodborne can tell you, FromSoft has a bit of a thing for Catholic art and architecture. As Augustine put it, the deliberate sin of the first man is the cause of original sin. For Augustine, this desire to become like gods, to live for himself, ensnared man in the open and manifest sin of doing what God had forbidden. For pride, the deliberate sin of the first man is the cause of original sin. For Augustine...
Alright, so I think I muted myself when I was saying this, but apparently he doesn't have subtitles for this, and I wasn't sure if he's reading this, so I'm just going to read it anyway, since he didn't start from the beginning. Quote, "The devil, then, would not have ensnared man in the open in manifest sin of doing what God had forbidden, had man not already begun to live for himself. It was this that made him listen with pleasure to the words, 'You shall be as gods.'" Genesis 3:5.
This desire to become like gods, to live for himself, ensnared man in the open and manifest sin of doing what God had forbidden. For pride is the beginning of sin, and what is pride but the craving for undue exaltation? The desire to become a god is this original sin that has tainted the lands between. Alright, so as far as parallels go, I think that's actually a pretty solid one if one were to compare it to like Christianity specifically. So I'm kind of on board with this as a thematic reading so far. Lines about pride reminded me of Goldmask and the fatal conceit he saw in Marika's Golden Order. According to his mending rune of perfect order, the current imperfection of the Golden Order, or instability of ideology, can be blamed upon the fickleness of the gods, no better than men. That is the fly in the ointment. In addition...
Oh yeah, then I guess this description would imply that Marika's a god. Well, damn it, that sucks, because we're at the point where Marika would have already been a god, so this proves nothing. Carry on.
Into the book of Genesis, Augustine based his arguments on chapter 5 of Paul's letter to the Romans.
From the moment then, when by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men in whom all sinned, the entire mass of our nature was ruined beyond doubt, and fell into the possession of its destroyer. And from him no one, no, not one, has been delivered, or is being delivered, or ever will be delivered, except by the grace of the Redeemer.
For Augustine, the original sin fundamentally changed human nature, since Adam's sin was passed on to all men. Augustine also blamed the faulty condition of human seed as the vehicle for transmitting original sin through human generations. In other words,
sin is stored in the balls.
Let's get back to Elden Ring. The idea that sin can be transmitted between generations reminds me of Emir's speech.
I fear that you have borne witness to the whole of it. The conceits, the hypocrisy of the world built upon the Erdtree. The follies of men. Their bitter suffering. Is there no hope for redemption? The answer, sadly, is clear. There never was any hope. They were each of them defective, unhinged from the start. Marika herself, and the fingers that guided her. And this is what troubles me. No matter our efforts, if the roots are rotten, then we have little recourse. Ever young Mikola saw things for what they were. He knew that his bloodline was tainted, his roots mired in madness. A tragedy, if ever there was one. That he would feel compelled to renounce everything. When the blame lay squarely with the mother.
Now, there are a few key distinctions between original sin in Western Christianity and how it's presented in the game. Amir's line that there is no hope for redemption. Obviously, in Christianity, Jesus is that hope for redemption. Now, what's interesting is that in a lot of Christian thought, Jesus is sometimes described as a second Adam, since he is the one who is going to redeem the original sin committed by Adam. So in a similar vein, I do wonder if Marika also is there to atone for and redeem her original sin of trying to ascend to godhood.
For as by one man's disobedience many were made sinners, so by the obedience of one shall many be made righteous.
There is some pretty obvious Christian symbolism with Marika being crucified, and to make this parallel even clearer, some early Christians compared the cross to a tree.
Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law, having become...
And Corin could probably elaborate further, but not all denominations of Christianity believe that Jesus was crucified on a cross. Like Jehovah's Witnesses believe it was a stake, and that also ties into some of the tree symbolism, but I'm not extremely familiar with that by any means.
Become a curse for us, for it is written, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree.
Yet in the DLC, we learn that Mikola feels tremendous guilt for his mother's actions and wants to atone.
Mikola has said as much himself. He wishes now to throw it all away. He says the act, though undoubtedly painful, will sear clean the Erdtree's wanton sin. The truth of his claim can be found at each cross. It is evidence enough to earn my belief.
Mikola, grant him forgiveness.
But I think Marika doesn't want Mikola to ascend to godhood. Unlike the other demigods, the Tarnished are only guided by grace to kill Mikola once it becomes possible for Mikola to become a god. A generous reading of Marika's actions is that she is
Oh yeah, that is interesting that grace kind of points us to Mikola as well. It's weird. Yeah, I was just looking back at the grant him forgiveness line. Don't know what to think about that. Anyway.
Trying to prevent Mikola from committing the same mistake that she made. Like Eve in the Garden of Eden, I believe that Marika was seduced into becoming a god. After Placidusax's god was fled, the Two Fingers needed a new god as a replacement, and Marika's shaman village just so happens to overlook the finger ruins of Deo, and the name Deo is most likely a reference to the Latin for god, Deo. But over time, Marika...
Insert your Jojo Konodilda memes here.
...would have second thoughts and sought a way to escape her godhood. Marika's source seal tells us that solemn duty weighs upon the one beholden, not unlike a curse from which there is no deliverance. That could explain why she enlisted Hugh to forge a weapon to slay a god. And in the DLC, Saint Trina, Mikola's discarded half, says,
Godhood would be Mikola's prison.
Duty is like a curse, Yakume. So does that mean fate is a curse? Is one cursed with fate? I do tend to think that grace might be artificial fate. And I guess more symbolically speaking, fate in a way is kind of synonymous with a life that should be lived. Which then, does that mean grace equals fate equals life? I don't like that idea. Even though I do tend to think that curses are a byproduct of being inundated with too much life, which eats away at the essence of the individual. But anyway, let me back this up. And then Cohiba 888, welcome into the stream. How far back in the timeline do I think Placidusax's end happened? I don't really know, because that's a really good question. Because the Baal stuff could have happened before the god fled. It could have happened after the god fled. It could have been what instigated the god being fled. So it could have happened eons before the age of the Horntent, for all we know, and it could have happened as late as like the war against the fire giants. It's all kind of really messed up in terms of how things connect together, but that's a really good question. And then Hilko was saying, arguably if the parallels with the Christian creation myth are more closely hewn, the two trees in the story might also somehow reflect in the story. The tree of knowledge / life. Maybe. Then the question becomes, which do you think is which and whatnot? No, I get what you're saying, yeah. So anyway, they were kicked out of Eden before they could also eat from the tree of life.
The caged divinity is beyond saving.
Instead, Marika will bear the burden of cleansing away sin. Unlike Adam and Eve, there were multiple different cultures before Marika, and while Adam and Eve lived in a paradise, Marika, not so much. Since Adam and Eve were the first humans, sin essentially spread to everyone. But if a similar theory of transmission is at play, that would mean the original sin would only taint Marika's bloodline. Based on this, I have some unhinged speculation that Marika might have been an Eve that gave birth, quite literally, to new races of people. And if that's the case, this would mean that the Tarnished are also part of Marika's bloodline, and would also be cursed with original sin. And for what it's worth, several NPCs do say that the Tarnished are cursed.
Slay the god.
Hold on, I zoned out a little bit too much with that. Let me back that up.
Quite literally, two new races of people.
Oops.
And if that's the case, this would mean that the Tarnished are also part of Marika's bloodline.
No, so his subtitles just kind of died somewhere in the middle of this video.
And would also be cursed with original sin.
Now I'm way too distracted. I'm going to have to back
several
it up
NPCs
again.
Do say that the Tarnished are...
Oh, this is too far.
Based on this, I have some unhinged speculation that Marika might have been an Eve that gave birth, quite literally, to new races of people. And if that's the case, this would mean that the Tarnished are also part of Marika's bloodline, and would also be cursed with original sin. And for what it's worth, several NPCs do say that the Tarnished are cursed.
Slay the god Marika, who cursed us all.
They will fight, and they will die in an unending curse.
What's more, in the 1.0 version, the Nox were called the descendants of Marika and members of the Empyrean family. So there is precedent for the idea that Marika could actually have seeded a much, much larger family. We do know her flesh melds harmoniously with others. The Hornsent Grandam also calls Marika,
"Listen, progeny of the Wanton's trumpet."
Right. I feel like we need a legitimate Elden Ring lore bingo card now, where Japanese is the free space and strumpet should be one of the squares that could get assigned randomly. And so anyway, Kohiba said, that's fair in relation to the timeline. You tend to place it long before Marika was even close to a thing, but there's way too much wiggle room, as with everything in this game. And then Hilko loves this bit most of all, which would kind of tie in with Jack as a Mimic's ideas, that Miquella is the oldest demigod. I'm not sure which one you're talking about. And then Discerning Tarnish says, they don't eat from the Tree of Life before being kicked out of Eden. Yes, I think he was saying that it parallels the fact that there were two trees, but they couldn't eat from the one. And then Liam Vickers, nice to see you again. Since the Tarnished are referred to as part of Godfrey's line and never Marika, you always figured the Tarnished were descendants of Godfrey's mistresses or descendants of his followers. Let me think about this. I could certainly buy that to a degree, especially since we're not described as being of the golden lineage, but there is that weird thing with Nefeli being the rightful ruler of Stormvale, I guess. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I guess I never really considered that too much. And then Moterian was asking, is Marika like a Lilith instead of an Eve? I think a lot of this really depends on how you're applying the Christian metaphor onto Elden Ring to begin with. And part of the reason why I say that is because we have other complications with Placidusax and its god and Metter and the Elden Beast and whatnot. So in some ways, I can see Marika representing both Lilith and Eve as just her own character with relation to the marriages between herself and Godfrey and herself and Radagon, and even in a certain sense Radagon's relationship with Renala.
For thy sins thou shalt have thy recompense. The sacred beast shall unleash its ire.
I do want to clarify a few things that might come up in the comments. Original sin is not the same thing as cardinal sin, both in Christianity and in the game. For Elden Ring,
the burning of the Erdtree is the first cardinal sin. Doing so will unbind destined death and slay the world itself.
So Marika's original sin is completely separate from the cardinal sin of burning the Erdtree.
And I honestly think this is arguable as to whether or not the cardinal/mortal sin should be understood as the original sin, or if this is just a case of synonyms referring to essentially the same thing, and whether or not we should take them to be literally different because they use literally different terminology, or if it's just reading into things too deeply, which, considering the nature of the game and how many open-ended questions there are, I don't blame anybody for anything really trying to look into this. And then Paisan asks, why does she say that burning the tree is what will release destined death? Honestly, I think it's the product of an earlier story draft, because there was a cut line of dialogue whenever you burned the Erdtree, which said that it was covered by black flames. And of course, like, black flame had an odd relationship to destined death with like the Glomide Queen and stuff. And so there is the possibility that death is literally being contained within the Erdtree. And that might be because people's souls are being sucked into its roots, essentially. And so if you burn the Erdtree, it might let the souls get filtered back out into the environment. We don't really know. It doesn't really seem to work that way, despite what we do in the game, because, like, it's not as though all the enemies just kind of die after that point in the game, which would be kind of cool, but terrible if you're trying to farm some runes. So anyway, yeah, good question. And then Wayne Kelly, welcome in. Regarding the timeline, didn't Gurm say the game takes place about 5,000 years after what he wrote? That's a lot of time to play with, if true. So, yes, but I mean, he's kind of saying that the Shattering and where we are takes place 5,000 years after, like, the heyday of the Golden Order, which he, like, wrote for the history of the demigods. And we don't know whether or not that means that the Golden Order existed for 4,000 and it's been like 1,000 for the Shattering, or if, like, the Shattering happened 5,000 years ago. I think I would need to double check that quote, but he also said that Elden Ring was a sequel to Dark Souls. So keep that in mind as well.
seduction and the betrayal.
As for who or what seduced Marika, I'll cover that in a separate video. For the betrayal, I have two theories. It may have been forbidden for someone like Marika to access the gates of divinity. She was just supposed to be a shaman, bred for life in a jar, so her performing the ritual was a betrayal of her allotted status. As an NPC Hornsent tells us, for pity's sake, your place is in the jar. Nigh sainthood itself awaits you within. For shamans like you, this is your lot. Life were you accorded for this alone. My second idea is that the betrayal refers to when Messmer became the least genocidal Stellaris player, and this is backed up by multiple NPCs.
Take vengeance upon Messmer and his lot. They who betrayed us, aye, they who burned us. Let them face in thy wrath their just deserts.
The Erdtree is my people's enemy, by Marika long betrayed, set aflame.
While it doesn't matter too much for this theory, I personally think Radagon was the Lord in this three-part setup. We also see in the story trailer that Marika looks a bit more androgynous than usual. A lot of people pointed out the hair color seems to be in between Marika and Radagon, though it could just be the lighting. We also find Rada fruit all throughout the Land of Shadow. In addition, in the English version, there was another mention to original sin in Mikola's Great Rune, but as I discussed in another video, that unfortunately was a major mistranslation. In the Japanese, there's no mention of sin at all. Instead, the key term is inga, which was translated as causality in the base game. So
yeah, about this topic, I guess I should watch Scareless Goldmask's video on that. I really don't blame the localizers for what they went with, and I think it's kind of an elegant solution to this problem where they're going to get boned no matter what they choose to translate inga as. I think causality is kind of an obvious choice because inga kind of does mean causality, but it means that in the sense of karma, and part of the issue with translating it as karma is, as I discussed in one of my videos, that karma has connotations relating to predestination in English, which isn't truly accurate to what it's supposed to represent in the game itself. And so karma is essentially causality, the chain of relations which give rise to the current state in the universe. And that's why in Buddhism, or like many Buddhists would say that like karma is inescapable, which isn't to say that you can't escape your fate. They're just saying that, hey bro, there's history. You are the way you are because of everything that came before, and you can't escape that. So that's kind of like the biggest difference. And I guess I should clarify here, when they say like you can't escape fate, they're not saying that you need to escape fate. They're just saying you need to confront it, accept it, and move past it, which is a really different read on things than I think most people would intuit from just reading karma alone. So to tie it back to the idea of sin, because it's talking about the very beginning, so like the causality from the beginning, that is really vague, and it could potentially make people think of like the greater will. But there is also some loaded terminology by using inga here, because like causality is part of like the law of causality with Radagon and Golden Order fundamentalism. So that might be worth considering as well. So yeah, I think it was just a mess, and the localizers were just put in a bit of a tough spot here. So I'm a little curious to see what Goldmask is going to say about this as we move on.
Term is inga, which was translated as causality in the base game. So instead of trying to bury the original sin, as it says in English, Mikola's goal is instead to try to go beyond causality.
Alright, so let's back this up. In the base game, inga had almost exclusively been translated as causality, and in the context of it being a law of causality of Golden Order fundamentalism, and in the context of it being a law of causality of Golden Order fundamentalism. And the only time inga appears in the DLC is in Mikola's Great Rune, so for consistency alone, it should have been translated as causality again.
Mikola's goal is instead to try to go beyond causality. And if you want to know what that is, I go into much more detail about how Mikola is deeply influenced by Buddhism. Now, in response...
So let me look back at that and consider it in relation to Goldmask's words here. So let's... Alright, so... to go beyond causality. I understand what Goldmask is saying, and then that is kind of literally what this description is saying, but I feel like the way he presented that isn't quite what this is trying to say exactly, because, like I was saying a moment ago, causality doesn't exactly do Inga justice because it's more related to that concept of karma, and because causality is related to like the law of causality externally from Elden Ring, just like the idea of causality in general, that's a little bit unfortunate because it makes it sound like Mikola is trying to cause a paracausal event or something like that. Whereas I think it's a little bit abundant when you have Ymir's dialogue taken in conjunction with this description that Mikola may be trying to transcend the transgressions of his mother and the bloodline of the Erdtree, which is why he abandons his body, which is why I think calling it sin within this context is a very elegant choice by the localizers. So, go figure, guys. I'm on the side of the localizers for once, to a certain degree. I mean, this isn't the first time, but anyway.
As Inga, which was translated as causality in the base game. So instead of trying to bury the original sin, as it says in English, Mikola's goal is instead to try to go beyond causality. And if you want to know what that is, I go into much more detail about how Mikola is deeply influenced by Buddhism. Now, in response to that video, some people argued that original sin wasn't a mistranslation of Inga, but instead was a localization. If that is the case, that honestly is much, much worse. There are definitely similarities between Christianity and Buddhism, which is one reason why many people in the West who have become disillusioned with the church have turned to Buddhism. That said, there are some pretty massive doctrinal differences between the concept of karmic causality in Buddhism and original sin in Christianity. The original sin was the inciting incident that introduced sin and or death into the world, whereas there is no real origin story for Buddhism. Karma is essentially a product of everyone's actions and is constantly in a state of flux. For most Christians, time
and that's not exactly wrong, but that doesn't have the full picture because even the things which came before are tied to karma, which is why it's referred to as causality. So, like I was saying a moment ago, I think trying to tie in that concept of cause and effect is pertinent in this description specifically with what it's trying to impress upon the player, in that Mikola is trying to overwrite what came before, but he isn't trying to upend the idea of causality itself, if that makes sense. You hadn't thought about Mikola's connection to the Archangel Michael? Oh, also like the name, yeah. He is Israel's advocate contesting Satan's claim to the body of Moses. He intercedes between God and humanity and serves as high priest in the heavenly sanctuary, and he accompanies the souls of the righteous dead to paradise. Yeah, that's true. That is a pretty apt comparison, I think.
is linear with a set beginning and an ending, whereas in Buddhism it's much more of a system of cycles. You also only have one lifetime, whereas you'd have multiple lifetimes to try to escape samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth. In fact, when Christian missionaries first reached Japan in the 16th century, Christianity was seen by many locals as a mistaken heretical offshoot of Buddhism, and one major point of contention was that Christianity did not teach Inga, the law of karma. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to know what Yins think.
Alright, so, despite my disagreements there toward the end, I think this was a really good video, and it's given me a lot to stew on. Not that I'm entirely sure that's what Goldmask was going for, with the whole like Radagon Marika situation. But hold on. Yeah, he did actually say that, and I wanted to touch on it, but I think I got distracted by other stuff that he was talking about. That I think he just kind of offhandedly said something about Radagon with the betrayal. Damn it, where was that?
Game for Elden Ring.
The burning of the Erdtree is the first cardinal sin. Doing so will
is completely separate from the cardinal sin of burning the Erdtree. Seduced Marika. For the betrayal, I have two theories. It may have been forbidden for someone like Marika to access the gates of divinity. She was just supposed to be a shaman, bred for life in a jar, so her performing the ritual was a betrayal of her allotted
trying to find it
alone. My second idea is that the betrayal refers to when Messmer became the least genocidal Stellaris player, and this is backed up by multiple NPCs.
Yeah, when did he say this?
Take
Is it like way over
vengeance
here?
upon Messmer and his lot. They who betrayed us, they who burned us. Let them face in thy wrath their just deserts.
The Erdtree is my people's enemy. By Marika.
In this three-part setup. We also see in the story much for this theory. I personally think Radagon was the Lord in this three-part setup. We also see in the story trailer that Marika looks a bit.
Let them face in thy wrath their just deserts.
The Erdtree is my people's enemy. By Marika long betrayed, set aflame.
Okay, yeah, so he does think that the story trailer shows Marika's ascension with Radagon as Lord. So this would put it after Godfrey's time. Okay.
Was the Lord in this three-part setup. We also see in the story trailer that Marika looks a bit more androgynous than usual. A lot of people pointed out the hair.
So he doesn't think that Marika was a full god before this point then, which is interesting. And I will really need to consider this because that is not something that came across my mind. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed that video. And then Hilko incurred the wrath of Nightbot, and now we are all banana-shaped punks who should stretch. So, all right. With that one out of the way, let's go ahead and check out The Lore of the Nameless Scadutree Tower and Messmer's Secret Alliance by Hawkshaw.
Shadow of the Erdtree finally answered a number of questions surrounding Elden Ring's lore, but in classic FromSoft fashion, it also gave us many more mysteries in exchange, and there's one that feels especially curious. This building. It's clearly an important building. It was shown in the gameplay trailer, the story trailer, and can be seen across the entirety of the Land of Shadow, even making up a central part of the first impression of the region. The tallest structure in the land, looming.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I wanted to comment on Gold Mask's video, so sorry to just do this so abruptly, but I will forget if I don't do this now. Hey man, I really enjoyed the video. One quick bit of constructive criticism. Could you work on balancing the audio a bit more for when the NPCs talk compared to your voice? It would also be nice if you centered the NPC dialogue in the speakers as well. For my own videos, I usually have multiple takes where I have the camera centered on the NPC for audio and other takes for cinematic stuff. Okay. So, sorry, Hawkshaw, let's go back in. The Red Herring Tower, for real.
Shadow of the Erdtree finally answered a number of questions surrounding Elden Ring's lore, but in classic FromSoft fashion, it also gave us many more mysteries in exchange, and there's one that feels especially curious. This building. It's clearly an important building. It was shown in the gameplay trailer, the story trailer, and can be seen across the entirety of the Land of Shadow, even making up a central part of the first impression of the region. The tallest structure in the land, looming even slightly above the Divine Gate of Inir Ilim, it towers over your entire journey over to the Shadow Keep. After wondering about it from the trailers, after finally working out the back passage to reach it, and then beating the infamous Gaius, we walked up to it, and then through it, and almost as if to emphasize its lack of lore, a new area text appeared and said, Scadutree Chalice. This bowl got its own area title, and even a unique named icon on the map, but the absolutely enormous, iconic structure right in front of it got nothing. What is it? What does it do? Why is it so thin? What's the shape at the top for? If you're like us, then it was a pretty frustrating moment lore-wise, even if the 5 fragments were a welcome reward. Sadly, the rest of the DLC sheds no further light on the structure. No item references it, no dialogue, no painting. So naturally, we then spent far too much time diving into everything else. The environmental design, architecture, surrounding lore, and so on. And we may just have found not only an answer to what this mysterious building is, but also that it points to a now hidden alliance of Messmer from before the Crusade. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss upcoming Elden Ring and Souls lore. To help frame our thoughts going forward, let's start with some theories for what this tower could be, highlighting what aspects of these theories do and don't make sense currently, before we dive into the detailed lore from the ground up. One theory stems from the natural impression of the tower. From most angles, including the shots from the trailers, the top of the tower beautifully frames a golden trail softly falling from the tree. In reality, it's the chalice behind that once caught the falling sap, so it follows that the tower served as a symbol for all to see, a symbol of the tree's bounty spread across the land entire. However, this doesn't explain everything. If the tower served as a symbol, why is the Shadow Keep located so close as to half obscure it? Not to mention that the keep even blocks access to it, with some walls that have no purpose other than to section off the area. Then there's the station of Gaius, who was both Messmer's friend and the leader of his men. Why would he and the Albinoric woman stay at a destroyed shack, unless...
Find the Albinoric woman. Anyway, yeah, I'm just really at a loss for how kind of far away the chalice is from where you can kind of see the sap dripping. So calling it the Red Herring Tower just was too good of a description for it. So there's a lot of really weird stuff going on with the Scadutree, and it annoys me. Yeah, Cohiba says, now sap just falls into the void and no one seems to mind. Well, I've wondered whether or not the second stalk spiraling around the tree is meant to be a literal sealing tree of the kind of Erdtree, the shadow tree, and that kind of prevents the sap from flowing out further. And I wondered if that was supposed to be the mechanism which would keep the Age of Abundance going forever. It's like, you can't bleed out if I sew your wound shut kind of deal. I don't know.
Gaius acts under strict orders. There are also some timeline confusions with the theory, but suffice to say there are still questions here. A second theory is that the tower served as some form of brace for the tree, a concept that was carried out for the Halig tree, where Elphael served as a support system. After all, Miquella often took inspiration from what came before. Perhaps this tower too at one point aided the tree. Given the Land of Shadow's connection to the Age of the Crucible, there may have at one point been many different trunks, all
So, I think I'm gonna probably just have to bite the bullet and work on my script talking about this kind of thing, and just more or less, rather than going with one cohesive narrative, just lay my cards on the table and say that I don't think either of these ideas fully flesh out and they kind of contradict each other. And I'm running into the issue of what seems like it should be obvious on paper, but just kind of falls apart the more that you look into it. versus the thing, which makes sense the more you look into it, but just kind of feels like 1984-ish, where you have to follow the command, the final most important command of the party, to not trust your eyes and ears too much in regard to that story trailer. And what I mean by that ties all back into when the Scadutree was kind of created and how that may or may not align with Marika and Radagon's ascension to God and lordship. But I don't know.
Vying for a spot in the sun, and this tower served to prop up one of them. Or it could have been to support the leaning tree. Naturally, this theory has some issues too. Though clearly well built, it seems unlikely that a structure built for support would be this tall and yet have such a narrow base, as surely the force it could support would be limited. Its positioning is also odd, where often braces try to counterbalance the leaning tree by pulling from the opposite side, or like Elfiel, by completely encircling the trunk. A third possible theory is that the tower was in fact a triumphal arch. Triumphal arches are freestanding monumental structures in the shape of an archway with one or more arched passageways that typically stand alone, unconnected to other buildings. Originating from the Roman Empire, these arches serve to commemorate victorious generals or significant public events such as the founding of new colonies, or the accession of a new emperor. The names of the types of arch can vary based on the reason they were built, but the overall pattern is clear. And it is true that if we ignore the fantasy design of the tower, it does bear a clear resemblance to many of these arches across the world.
Oh no, guys, maybe maybe the upside down theory is true and that this arc was upside down. Or like, we're looking at it upside down and it was right side up originally. Anyway, yeah, when I saw this, I always kind of had like Arc de Triomphe vibes, so I'm glad he's bringing this up.
The triple arch triumphant monument of Orange in particular resonates with the tower's design. This theory would suggest the tower stood as a monument after some great military victory or royal development or otherwise. However, the theory is again hurt by the Shadowkeep being so close, diminishing the marvel. Also, while these structures are meant to stand alone to better symbolize triumph, historically they were designed to span a road and to be passed through, not around. But the tower in Elden Ring seems to have no road or even a path leading up to it, and one can also just walk around it, made even more strange by the nearby enormous ramparts that section off the area and completely undermine the triumphal design. There's a number of other theories to speculate on. Could the tower be some sort of gate with a portal at the top that took inspiration from the Divine Gate? Is there a relation to the Divine Towers? Might it be to do with communion with an outer god? What if it predated the nearby tree? With so little information, the possibilities are endless.
Right, and so as we were looking back at that story trailer, we did see at least one angle where the tower wasn't visible in relation to the tree. And based off of like the curling of the tree and everything, there should have been no way where we didn't see the tower. So anyway.
So let us know what your thoughts are down below. All of these theories could be true, but at the risk of getting lost in speculation, let's review what we know, focusing on details that feel out of place. And something that I found...
Alright, I was going to let it go, but I'm not going to because it's just kind of funny to bring it up. I'd like to make the distinction between all theories being true and any of them being true, because them all being true simultaneously is just kind of funny.
Useful for organizing my thoughts is Skillshare, the sponsor of this video. Skillshare is an online community that offers a huge range of classes to help you level up almost anything. If you've got an unexplored passion or something you want to take to a professional level, Skillshare is the perfect place to do it. For me, I've used it to improve my workflow, which helps the endless lore brainstorming to no end. I'm excited to take a look at this course, for example, to better organize projects going forward. But for you, it could be taking up an instrument, learning game development, or starting your own business. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So why not start today? The end of summer is a perfect time to get learning, and they've recently upgraded the class system so you can easily discover the right place for you. The tower is the closest structure to...
And then, hey, Camellia, nice to see you again. Charles Godfrey, sometimes referred to as Godefroy, was the first person to fly through the Arc de Triomphe. So the DLC gives the Godefroy lore we were all after. I think somebody had posted that in the Discord like 2 or 3 days ago. Is that you? Or this sounds way too familiar. Or maybe it was a Discord post of a tweet, something like that. Because I've definitely heard this very recently. It was not you? Okay. But yeah, thanks for sharing regardless.
The Scadutree. It is unnamed and lacks any reference in-game, ironically overshadowed by the Scadutree chalice. However, it is clearly important, not just within the world given its stature, but also in development from its prominent exposure in the trailers. Located nearby is the Shadow Keep, whose finish resembles that of the tower. The keep's size, though technically not as tall, for the most part obscures the marvel of the tower, and more than that, it blocks access to it. To reach the Shadow View, the Tarnished has to enter the keep through the church district at the back, head to the loft of the specimen storehouse, navigate across the wooden rafters, take 2 lifts joined by this temporary wooden walkway all the way to the base of the keep.
So, I don't mean to cut him off in the middle of his thoughts, but I might lose my thought unless I share it now, in that I wonder if the betrayal could be Marika making the Scadutree potentially as a sign of peace or something, and saying that she's going to seal away the realm of shadow and give them their own kind of Erdtree with blackjack and hookers, and then only for it to be revealed to be a farce of a tree and that she doesn't really care about them. Because they were like promised grace, at least her soldiers were, or something along those lines, but they were never given it. They feel abandoned. But this is just trying to contend with the issue of, if the Land of Shadow was connected to the Erdtree at one point in the past, then where do you fit the Scadutree in relation to the Erdtree in these 2 lands? So it was either always part of the Erdtree, and then like something shifted out of the Erdtree when Marika shifted the Land of Shadow away from the Lands Between, or when she sealed away the Land of Shadow, she took something from the Erdtree with it and put it here as well. So anyway. Hey Vorb, nice to see you again.
And then defeat Commander Gaius. Strangely, strewn across the entirety of the commander's courtyard are the remains of banished knights and some gladiator weapons. Nowhere else in the realm of shadow are these found. And then, just before the tower, is a broken Albinauric shack. This isn't a small list of interesting details, and yet it's still tough to discern what it all means. So, we looked closer. The tower features some interesting detailing. There are these flame-like stands at the bottom. The distinctive triple arch.
That's what I was thinking of with the Church of the Bud. I knew I saw some flame things elsewhere, so it was on here. So definitely different depictions here. Anyway, Cohiba said the Erdtree represents order and perfection, and the Scadutree is chaos and evolution in their headcanon. So that kind of reminded me that the Golden Seeds mentioned that the Erdtree was once perfect and eternal. And I guess we have another contradiction of that potential reading with the minor Erdtree incantations saying that it represents Marika's kindness without order. And so I don't know if you could say something is perfect if it was without order. And this just kind of backs up my headcanon that the Erdtree did not begin perfect and eternal and was made to be later perfect and eternal with the rise of the Golden Order and whatnot.
Arch partway up and the semicircle at the top. And then there are these pointed arches made of a number of columns, followed by some elaborate stone tracery, 2 circular shapes which oddly reminded us of the curse blades. And most distinctive of all, at the top of this there is ornamental detailing of 4-leafed flowers. What's curious is that the tower actually shares very little of this architecture with the Shadowkeep, despite their similar first impressions. The triple arches or the semicircle are not found anywhere, and the flame stands are only seen, curiously, surrounding the main gate plaza and the statue of Marika. The church district has some four-leaf detailing, but it's too distinct to be connected. There is only one building in the entire Shadowkeep that shares the arch and flower detailing of the tower, the Specimen Storehouse. And with this in mind, take a look at the architecture of the Shadowkeep as a whole. While at first the tower and the entire keep seem to be entirely cohesive, look at the shapes on display. The Specimen Storehouse features pointed arches, ornate detailing, and flying buttresses. It appears Gothic in inspiration. Meanwhile, the rest of the keep, though there's still some Gothic inspiration, is much closer to the architecture seen in medieval Europe. The brickwork is not so ornate, and the shapes use larger angles. There are battlements, curtain walls and towers, a fortified gatehouse, and the term keep is most commonly associated with this period of history. There are two distinct styles within the Shadowkeep. The outer walls, church district, and Messmer's tower are all medieval European, and the storehouse and Nameless tower are Gothic. This is why the detailing on the tower is only found on the storehouse, and this is the first clue to its history.
So yeah, I like these comparisons so far. And then Vorb, thanks for checking in if you gotta head out. Appreciate that. Then Matthew Sargent, nice to see you again. You wish we had literally anything in the game about the Helfin and how it fits into all of this, if it even does. If it helps, which I'm sure it doesn't, you might be able to headcanon in the Inquisitors having a barbed candlestick style design as being indicative of the Helfin, and the Helfin potentially being a spiral tree, but I don't think that might help. Then Cohiba agrees. You think Marika attempted and sort of failed to make the tree perfect. And then Matthew says the four-petal flower is found on the Death Knight's weapons. Interesting. I also wonder if that petal is the one that we see. Wait, where do we see this? Was it the Viridian? No, because that's turtley. I think there's something relating to the four-leaf or four-petaled flower and like stamina somewhere, but I'm drawing a blank. And then Muramasa, welcome on in. Have I watched Godwin Malformed Dragon by Scum Mage Infa? I don't think I watched that one. I know I watched one video by him and I was not a fan. So anyway, going back to this one.
The second clue lies on a sigil that is found all over the medieval walls, but not on the Gothic sections of the keep. This sigil is littered across the realm of shadow to mark the conquest of Messmer's crusade, and is also featured on the floor of Messmer's room. His black armor describes the symbol as his crest, but look at the sigil that appears within the incantations derived from Messmer's flame. This one is different, showing only a clean symbol of his undulating flame. If the former design was truly Messmer's own crest, why would the incantations not show the same? This incantation sigil, purely of Messmer's fire, makes only a part of the crest shown throughout the realm of shadow and the Shadowkeep. Instead, the crest denotes a circular boundary, split in the middle by a spiraling arrow shape. On the left is Messmer's sigil, and symmetrically arranged on the right is a circular, helical spiral of a similar size. Both symbols are clearly of equal importance, and they are bound together somehow. There's a practice that became standardized during the 14th.
Cool, he was going to bring it up. I was hoping he would, and I didn't want to step on his toes there. So Matthew said it's also on the Crimson Amber medallion. Okay, thank you. I thought it was the medallions, but I knew the turtle one looks like kind of like tree roots, for lack of a better description. So that helps put my mind at ease. Appreciate that. Oh, and you get that from the Death Knight as well. Interesting. That makes sense. Kind of. Well, Anyway.
And 15th centuries in Europe, particularly in England, Scotland and France, that is called impalement. Impalement is a heraldic term that refers to the practice of combining two coats of arms side by side within a shield. The technique is a symbolic and practical way to represent relationships, alliances, and multiple inheritances within a single shield, and highlights the unity and shared identity of the factions involved, while still maintaining the distinctiveness of each coat of arms. I propose that this crest of Messmer, that frames two distinct sigils within one border, is a product of heraldic impalement, and once symbolized the union of Messmer with another. The question is who? The exact design of the circular spiral is unique to the crest, but let's pick it apart. We've previously talked on the channel about the relevance of the spiral design in Elden Ring, and in Shadow of the Erdtree its importance has been made clear. The spiral is a normalized crucible current that one day will form a column that stretches to the gods. Spirals relate to the power of the crucible and the path to divinity, and this technique was deeply venerated by none other than the Hornsent. The spiral and their attempts to reach the gods pervade every aspect of their society. For their incantations, their architecture, and everything in between, the spiral is a core aspect of their culture. However, it's more than speculative at this point to connect Messmer's crest to the Hornsent. Messmer led the crusade against the Hornsent after all, burning most of their inhabitants to spirits, and left their civilization broken and sealed away. Right? Well, what about before the crusade? The timeline of the Land of Shadow is something for another video, though we are very excited to dive into it. But suffice to say that the rise of the Erdtree and Marika was separate to the crusade of Messmer, and there was a long period between the two. A story told time and again by the land, since everything within the Land of Shadow, save for Miquella and his followers, was there before the realm was sealed away. If Miquella, a powerful Empyrean, struggled this much to reach the Veiled Land, then surely it would be all but impossible for everyone else. Thus, what is found in the Shadow Realm can serve to date what already existed before the veiling. The furnace golems feature firehead decorations, a tactic to spread fear that is used elsewhere, and that dates them post the war against the fire giants. Commander Gaius and Messmer both were his elder brothers.
Yeah, the Wicker Men also have fire giant faces on their thighs, or, you know, their equivalent of thighs, so definitely agree that it's a post-fire giant phenomenon. Anyway.
To the lion Radahn, who was born after the Liurnian Wars. Gaius also trained with Radahn, immediately after which was the Star Scourge conflict. Messmer knows about the Tarnished and their lack of grace, an event from the end of Godfrey's age.
And there was some of the cut dialogue where he says like he heard about us from Miquella, so that might explain it, but nonetheless, Quayline, if he is aligned with Messmer, could show that Messmer should have had some passing familiarity with the Tarnished, which is not that surprising if you keep in mind the connection between the Carians and the Messmer's forces, I guess, but anyway.
Tons of items that hail from the Erdtree Empire throughout the land, such as the various amber medallions of the largest variety.
Okay, so we were talking about this design. So I guess it is a little bit different than what was on the door, but sweet. Glad to have a look at this now.
The Talisman of Lord's Bestowal, or the Dueling Shield, which was once used in ritual combat performed to honour the Erdtree, a custom that had somehow remained within the realm of Shadow. Not to mention the presence of enemies like Royal Revenants, ulcerated tree spirits, omen killers, death knights, and beyond, whose associated history all date well into the reign of Marika. So there was a substantial period between the birth of the Erdtree and the veiling of the Land of Shadow, and I argued that the Erdtree and Hornsent were in fact friendly during this time. Now, at first this feels impossible. Marika's people, the shaman, were horribly mistreated by the Hornsent. She clearly held them in contempt in later years when she ordered Messmer's crusade. Plus, why would the Hornsent support one of their shamans rising in power to found an empire of their own that might threaten the Hornsent rule? All these are valid questions, but the exact nature of Marika's rise to power is currently still difficult to parse. So,
pun intended, crackpot theory time. What if Marika had the horn scent jar her own people for the purposes of her own ascension. I'm sure somebody's probably brought that up somewhere before, but just thinking about it now, I don't know. Like, and of course, I don't think this represents a pot or anything like that, but it really sucks that we have all of these loose threads, another pun intended, I suppose, with everything pertaining to the temptation and the betrayal.
Whether Marika's rise was sanctioned or not, who the seduction and the betrayal mentioned in the story.
All right, so this is a little bit of a nitpick, and not like me. This isn't really meant to be a complaint about the. I don't know how to phrase this. Anyway, there's something going on with the visuals of this video, which reminds me of like what's called the soap opera effect. Like, it seems that it's putting in too many frames and smoothing out the footage, but it's wrong, if you know what I mean. And some people might know what this is like, or know what the effect is that I'm talking about. I always forget what it's actually called. Motion smoothing. Yeah, it seems like motion smoothing has been turned on by Hawkshaw, because this is not how the trailer looks. Like, it's too smooth and it looks unnatural.
Trailer.
So I'll just back that up. Interpolation. I think it is technically different, but you might be right.
Marika's rise was sanctioned or not, who the seduction and the betrayal mentioned in the story trailer was in reference to. All that will have to wait for another time to properly dive into the horn scent culture. But for now, what's important is whether there was an alliance, not how it arose. And once again, the evidence for the union of the Erdtree and horn scent civilizations is everywhere. First is the amount of shared features between each culture. If Marika grew up as a shaman, she would be well aware what the spiral meant. It's prominently featured on the jars after all. And yet, if we look at the Erdtree civilization, up until the consolidation of the Golden Order proper with fundamentalism, the spiral is everywhere. In sigils, on the armor of Leyendel's soldiers, even in hair. And then, everything from the Golden Order proper onwards does away with the spiral completely, and this is no longer found.
Oh man, am I going to have to incorporate this into my Pepe Sylvia theories here? This isn't really a complaint, it's just... I don't like having to rely on this kind of visual symbolism at times.
For example, Radahn when he is young, when he trained with Messmer and Gaius, and the Land of Shadow was not yet veiled.
Oh, no, that's not true, because we do get a kind of spiral design in the Halig tree, but of course you could use that as an argument that it's diverting itself, or divesting itself of the Golden Order. And then Matthew still can't let go of the idea that Marika could be pulling those threads from the belly of a pregnant woman. It's all you see when you watch that trailer. Yeah, they definitely made it look a certain kind of way with some intentionality in mind, because I don't know how people won't get that kind of mental imagery out of it. Anyway.
As a braid, but later in his life he loses it. Similarly, Marika's statues within the Land of Shadow shows her wearing a spiral waistband that is no longer shown in the lands between. The Erdtree sigil contains spiral.
Oh, this only came out 1 day ago? Whoops. I usually like to try and wait for videos to get like their own run through before I react to them, so that way I'm not just like chasing them exactly. I was a little bit curious which video came first, Hawkshaw's or Kite Tails, so that kind of answers the question. I'm going to back that up.
The Erdtree sigil contains spirals at every stage until Golden Order fundamentalism. There's stone tablets that likely contain the horn scent notes on the ancient ruins of Raw found in Marika's bedchamber. Grafting is found in both cultures, as is the focus on the growth of trees and the melding of flesh to aid their growth. The list goes on, but for me the clearest sign that Marika and the Erdtree were once allied to the horn scent is the sense of betrayal the horn scent feel to this day.
Your kind are not forgiven. The Erdtree is my people's enemy, by Marika long betrayed. set aflame.
It can't be a betrayal if they were never friendly to begin with, and the sentiment feels far too strong for if this was only because Marika was a shaman. The Empyrean Grandam illustrates this further.
Listen, progeny of the wanton's trumpet. For thy sins thou shalt have thy recompense.
A strumpet means a prostitute or promiscuous woman, but wanton means either deliberate and unprovoked, or sexually unrestrained. So the phrase wanton strumpet is a repetition. It's a tautology of an already very loaded sentiment, which I think illustrates the level of personal resentment the Grandam feels towards Marika. One could even speculate, given her name Empyrean Grandam, that she may have been closely involved with Marika's upbringing in some manner. Nonetheless, the image painted here is not just a cruel tyrant who exterminated an entire race, but one who betrayed a civilization that trusted her. Take vengeance upon Messmer and his lot. They who betrayed us, aye, they who burned us. Let them face in thy wrath their just deserts. So, the Erdtree.
Hey Pigsy, welcome back in. Your comment here kind of made me think about something. So yeah, you said Radagon gets that waistband, so that is sort of a check against this connection. Not that it is all wrong, but then you said maybe Marika is just a strumpet because she left one husband for another. That's actually a really interesting point. And if the Hornsent were aligned with Marika during Godfrey's reign, then I could definitely see why chasing him out of the lands between and quote-unquote stealing his grace would be a sign or would be reason enough for people who may have been more aligned with Godfrey to call her a wanton strumpet, or essentially, as Kite Tails would say, a slutty slut. So, yeah. She's just Hornsent Grandam now. So as far as the Empyrean part of her name is concerned, I never interpreted the Hornsent Grandam, Empyrean Grandam, to literally be an Empyrean. I thought of it as the Grandam to an Empyrean, which, if you think that sounds a little bit strange, I think it might also be relevant to consider how the Finger Reader Crone down in the Deep-Root Depths region was said to be the wet nurse of Godwyn. So I don't necessarily think it would have been entirely out of character for a Finger Reader Crone-esque individual to be the wet nurse of another Empyrean. If whether or not God was an Empyrean is kind of irrelevant. Hilko says wanton feels a bit misplaced in that context, though. As far as the Japanese is concerned, she's just called like a kanpu, which is a really archaic term to refer to a whore or like a slovenly woman. So I think calling her a wanton strumpet is a pretty good localization. But yeah. Anyway, I don't think it's like that important. And Cohiba likes the take about the Golden Order removing the spiral from its imagery. Fits pretty neatly with how the Golden Order removed the Crucible related stuff. Yeah, I will need to seriously consider that a bit more, to be honest.
And the Hornsent were once allied, and Messmer's crest depicts his sigil next to a spiral circular one that suggests an alliance. This alliance built the medieval part of the Shadow Keep, which is decorated all over with the crest. But what about the specimen storehouse? I could only find the odd place with Messmer's crest, such as this fireplace Freya studies by. But on closer inspection, this is clearly a later addition to the building, jutting out as a separate block from the wall.
I think you could also see this near where you get the Hilda ashes, but I might be misremembering.
Otherwise, the lack of crests is quite a strange contrast to the rest of the keep, and the only ones to be found are hidden right at the top of the tower. On the wooden rafters, near the cogs powering the central rotating mechanism, the spiral circular sigil can be found. Just this symbol, with no sign of Messmer's. Not only does this confirm that this was once its own design, and that Messmer's crest is a product of heraldic impalement, but it may hint that this tower was made by this spiral circle faction. There are even rugs with very similar designs to Messmer's flag, except they don't feature his crest. Instead, there are only spiral patterns and the spiral arrow. So, if this spiral faction has ties to the Hornsent, does the architecture of the storehouse share any features with Ballarat or Anir Elim? For the most part, there is no clear repeated brickwork, reliefs, or general motifs, and the architecture is entirely different. However, though this is speculative of course, and I encourage you to come to your own conclusions, take a look at this repeating design found in both Ballarat and Anir Elim. They are decently worn down, but consist of a repeating circular linking trail with flourishes back and forth to fill the space. Now look at this design in the storehouse. While definitely not an exact match, they do share a remarkably similar pattern. Even the relative proportions of the flourishes back and forth match. This new design is more detailed and depicts vines or branches flowing back and forth, with leaves facing forwards and what look like bunches of grapes facing back. Even if this stonework was aged, it would never look the same as what is found in the Land of the Tower, but I think they're too similar to be mere coincidence. Similarly, look at the spiral pattern on this lift in Anir Elim. Again, the design differs to the circular spiral sigil, but it is also difficult to ignore the similarities.
I feel like that's a bit of a stretch there. I do have an idea for what all this is related to, but I will wait until he's kind of done making some points.
All this makes me think that the storehouse designs do stem from the same place, but they evolved many years later. Nonetheless, take a look at the interior of the storehouse. Like the Shadowkeep, the first impression is pretty cohesive. A busy place full to the brim with tablets, bodies, and scrolls. However, on looking closely, does all this academia fit the original building? Look at the bookshelves, the walkways, the outdoor sections. Recall what it's like to explore the storehouse. It's confusing and unclear. This roof covers the intricate stonework we've just been looking at. It's clear that the storehouse interior has been completely updated at some point to better serve its new purpose. Similarly, perhaps the exterior was updated with winged snake statues to...
So yeah, except for this part right here, which I don't have strong feelings about, I do think that a lot of these observations are really good in terms of what it would have taken to make the Shadowkeep look the way that it does.
Represent the new management. The lore surrounding Messmer's Fire Knights confirms this timeline, who only partway through the Crusade chose to rise above the barbarism of their orders. Salza, a sage of the Fire Knights, burned more villages and...
Let me pack that up.
It's clear that the storehouse interior has been completely updated at some point to better serve its new purpose. Similarly, perhaps the exterior was updated with winged snake statues to represent the new management. The lore surrounding Messmer's Fire Knights confirms this timeline, who only partway through the Crusade chose to rise above the barbarism of their orders. Salza, a sage of the Fire Knights, burned more villages and scorched more land than any other. Then he refused to burn down an old ruin, at the risk of his own life. The ruins in question were of course the ruins of Roar, whose flora remains lush despite the Crusade clearly sweeping through the region.
So is that an indication that the greenery predates the Scadutree and whatnot? That would certainly go in line with a lot of my ideas about that, but anyway.
Salza convinced others, such as Hilda, who joined those who urged that the specimens be preserved. Therefore, it was late into the Crusade that the central tower of the keep was adapted and became the specimen's storehouse. Bodies and tablets from the ruins were taken to be stored and studied, and the Fire Knights movement preserved an incredible resource from what could be the most ancient civilization of the lands between. I don't believe the storehouse could have been built after the rest of the Shadowkeep, given it serves as the central hub. Joining to the Shadowview and the Hinterlands.
Wait, what? Hold on. Did he say that the way that I thought he said that?
Source from what could be the most ancient civilization of the lands between. I don't believe the storehouse could have been built after the rest of the Shadowkeep, given it serves as the central hub. Joining to the Shadowview and the Hinterlands, to Messmer's Chamber and to the Roar Ruins. Though Gothic architecture is typically a later development than European medieval architecture, their respective periods of use overlapped, and in Elden Ring's world it is clear that complex stonework was possible at a far earlier era, shown by the land of the tower.
Alright, that's a bit of a fair assessment. I was like, is he just kind of ignoring the architecture? I can kind of begrudgingly see where he's going with that, but I guess I would also want to double check / compare that to the architecture of the church district again, because I don't remember exactly how that looks off the top of my head. And then Pixie was saying, this makes sense given that it was a later idea to save the specimens that was debated. The room would have been built before that for a different purpose. Okay. And then Ayinat, welcome back in. You just realized that technically Messmer's also stored in the specimen storehouse? He might technically be out of it because he's in like a different tower, but yeah. That golem got you too? He jump scared me, but he did not hit me. Boy, did he scare the crap out of me though. That damn noise. And then Hilko said maybe the Shadowkeep is kind of like the schism Christianity between Christianity and Constantinople vibe-wise. Alright, let's go back in.
So, the Alliance of Messmer is related to the Hornsent in some way.
I disagree.
This faction was likely the original inhabitant of the now Specimen Storehouse. The Hornsent were once allied to the Erdtree, which explains how Messmer ended up allied to a Hornsent adjacent faction in turn. And then, famously, the Hornsent were betrayed by Marika and Messmer. So, if we are right so far, that means Messmer must have betrayed his alliance too. And such a story is actually depicted throughout the keep. There are black spirits.
I'm not sure if I want to wait to spring my idea or... Yeah, I guess I'll just hear him out because it'll be awkward if I like contradict him and then we just have to sit through the rest. So I'll shut up.
Spirits all over, burnt by Messmer's flame, who do not have horns. There are boats set aflame, decorated with spiral infinity symbols, that once belonged to the Tibia Mariners. The Tibia Mariner in Kara's hidden grave summons a royal revenant, which neatly illustrates that they were once on good terms.
Oh, there is a revenant in the DLC? I didn't know that. Cool. Chalk it up to another reused asset. I don't know, I'm just kind of kidding around.
With the Erdtree faction before this betrayal. And if you stand close to the burning boats in the Shadowkeep, you can hear this unique sound.
That's so strange that the Tibia Mariner can summon that guy. Because they seemed like completely unrelated things, and I thought the reason that the Revenants were the way that they were is because they were cursed. Which I think is slightly, or at least I thought was supposed to be different from Rancor, which is a curse, but it's a different form of it. Like it's a death-adjacent curse, where Rancor was like life-adjacent, even though they get called by bells. I don't know, maybe it's all the same after all.
Which to me suggests that it's a relatively recent affair, and the spirits continue to suffer. But most striking of all is a mass slaughter hidden behind the keep, away from prying eyes where we fight Gaius. The remains of an entire army of banished knights. Knights which otherwise are not seen once in the entirety of the realm of Shadow. In the lands between, the banished knights serve as mercenaries across the entire realm. They feature in Stormvale, the mountaintops, Farum Azula, Caelid, even the capital, not to mention the various battlegrounds their remains are found in.
Oh yeah, that is true, and I guess you do kind of get the circular style pattern on the veteran set, if I'm remembering correctly.
So it feels odd to me that the only banished knights in the Land of Shadow are all together in one very densely packed location. To me, the stark contrast to the impression of the knights in the base game illustrates one clear thing. While those in the lands between serve as independent mercenaries, the banished knights behind the Shadowkeep made up an organised army. The banished knights have more in common with the Hornsent than you might realise. Before the DLC, they seem to take inspiration from dragons. However, we now know that the ancient dragons incited the act of dragon communion across the realm, and the banished knights as established mercenaries were just quick on the uptake. This is why it's the standard form of the helm that has the red scarf. where it's the altered, updated helm that features the dragon. Looking at this armor piece and this horn on the shoulder, what if instead it relates to the horn scent? If we look at their commander's armor, the dragon motif is no longer present, but the horns are much more prominent. Not to mention, the power of the Banished Knights, and especially the commanders, relates to the storm, just like the horn scent. Wind, ice, and lightning. And there's a number of peripheral details at Banished Knight locales that together point to the horn scent. The lion reliefs found at Stormvale and the Fortified Manor may link to the lion worship of the horn scent. It's at the Fortified Manor that there is finally another iteration of the spiral circle sigil in Messmer's crest and the specimen storehouse, right there on the round table, encircling the Erdtree and Crucible sigil.
Good job with the graphic. I don't know if I would agree with that, though. This does look a little bit visually distinct. And then Cohiba said the connection between the storm and the crucible is something you've struggled a lot with. You've been thinking the Banished Knights belong to whatever civilization unites Fair Missoula, Leyndell, and Anir Lim. Yeah, so I think that is a very strong possibility. And on the last lore through that I did, I actually took the trouble of comparing the Banished Knight set. Well, at least the veteran carrying commander's rallying standards depiction of like the bird looking like thing, dragon looking like thing. And it turns out it's actually just Sirach, unironically. I don't think I have a good picture of the Erdtree surcoat, but hold on. So Hawkshaw might end up persuading me regardless. Let me look at my screenshots. So this is the rallying standard. And I was like, what is this bird thing? Because it looks like it has feathers, right? It's just Sirach, guys. Believe it or not, it is Sirach. So, oh, wait. I do have it. Can I flip this? Not like that. Okay. Let's try something else. I don't think I can edit anymore like this. Because it's going to be like, oh, Microsoft Store. Yeah, screw me, right? Okay, hold on. But I still know how to use Paint. And I can flip this image. Oh, no, this just reminds me. Okay, so I can flip this image. And let's do some CSI level zooms. Hey guys, look, it's Sirach. This is Sirach. But for whatever reason, Sirach here has a lot more stuff going on, which made him look more like a bird. And the reason why I say this is Sirach so definitively is because that's what it said on the thing. The description itself, it depicts the distant Erdtree as well as the Beast Regent, Sirach. So, Banished Knights be wielding this rallying standard. They lost their lord. They were the wings of the Stormlord. What's his face? Not Niall, but Oleg and Ingval. So, it does seem very likely that Sirach could have been the Stormlord after all through all of this Banished Knight connection. So, we don't know if that's true because there's always the possibility that Sirach and the Banished Knights could have been servants to Fair Missoula and Placidusax, especially with the Malekith connection, because he is the beast clergyman of Fair Missoula. He gives us the hammer, which was related to Sirach, like the beast claw hammer, whatever it's called. And so, if the beasts were drawn to champions and whatnot, and they weren't truly the leaders of their own order, this would be one of the easiest connections to make. You'd think Godfrey would have used some storm ability if Siraj was the Stormlord. Well, he kind of uses an Earth storm ability, because that is also one of the things that the dudes use. They spew rocks, and he kicks rocks in the non-metaphorical sense. So anyway, let's go back to the video real quick.
There are differences, such as the line through the middle of the spiral, and the repeated pattern is also closer to the design in Anir Elim than the storehouse, but it's the closest match we could find. The sigil on the cape of the Banished Knight Commanders is also interesting for having a spiky...
Okay, so yeah, this is a bit more different after all. I thought it was kind of similar, but not fully, which is probably why it didn't stick out in my mind a bit more.
Circular design that could have evolved with the spiral horn scent influence. Finally, deep within the Shadow Keep, there's a unique door that actually depicts the World Tree relief that precedes the latest Erdtree depiction. The same design that is found at Stormvale, the fortified manor, Redmane Castle, and so on, which all have history tied to the Banished Knights. While each piece of evidence is hard to make any conclusions with, when taken together, everything starts to paint a clearer picture. So, my proposal is that the Banished Knights were part of the original faction who inhabited the storehouse, a faction that derived from the Horn Scent, and that may have even included the Tibia Mariners. There's a lot of interesting details that are shared between the depiction of the Helfen and the storehouse, even without the Tibia Mariner boats, whose themes are clearly integral to the Land of Shadow. However, there's also a lot that doesn't add up too, such as the top of the structure, but I think it's worth mentioning. It feels natural that an army with ties to the Horn Scent and to Godfrey was set up with Messmer during their alliance. The army was allied to Messmer for a time, and then, all at once, they were betrayed. This is why there are no others across the Land of Shadow. They were ordered to group together. It was a cold, calculated roundup and execution of an army filled with trust. And with that lens, listen to the story told by the faction's history. Knights who, whether by misfortune or misdeed, were forced to abandon their homes. Commander Neil, veteran of Castle...
And I didn't point this out, at least verbally, but I thought it really loudly. I think based off of what we saw with the rallying standard, we could probably surmise that this is also the same depiction on the helmet, and it's also a depiction of Siraj. So keep that in mind. And this isn't entirely related to what Hawkshaw was talking about directly, but if we think that the Shadow Altus is or was ever part of the real Altus Plateau, then it might be possible that all of the dead Banished Knights in that area were part of a fight before the lands got separated, and that could have connected potentially to the innermost portion of the like between the inner and outer ramparts of Leyndell, where we see all of the other Banished Knight armor sets and whatnot. And then Aina asks, could Siraj be the Stormlord though? Yes, I do think that is a strong possibility now.
Steed were forced to abandon their homes. Commander Neil, veteran of Castle Sol, offered this prosthesis in exchange for the lives of defeated knights held prisoner. He went on to lead these men as an army of no nation. Niall was a lone survivor who commanded spirits to defend his long-past master. The hefty furnace pot is created using embers of Messmer, and its flame burns away both body and soul.
So just to build on this some more, we've got this sun-like depiction in Castle Sol, which, you know, Castle Sol, Sol equals sun. And we also do get this show up in Fair Missoula. And so if Siraj is related to the Banished Knights, and this used to be a castle or a fort that they controlled, then does that mean that Siraj is also affiliated with the sun, and the sun is affiliated with Fair Missoula, and in Fair Missoula we have like the Beastmen who have the Sun Realm shield, which can also be found on those who live in death throughout the Lands Between. So it does seem even more likely that all of the Lands Between may have been under the purview of the dragons and potentially sublet by Siraj and his forces, and that could have been the Sun Realm that is long vanished at this point, and that might be the commonality between Fair Missoula, the Banished Knights, and the Hornsent, and then Godfrey, I guess. But that also raises a lot of questions of like, how the hell did Godfrey and Marika overcome all of these forces? Did they usurp control of the Banished Knights and use them to conquer everything? Were they then betrayed later on by Marika? Does that deal with the betrayal? So obviously I've not talked a lot about these possibilities on the channels yet, but that's partially because this has been a topic that's so nebulous to the rest of the lore in the game that you really need a lot of context to make it make sense. It's not just something that you can say out loud and people be on board with. Yeah, Paisan thinks that connection makes sense between Sarash and the Storms. And then Cohiba said the Banished Knights have an ancient dragon on their helmets and wield dragon communion incantations, which are regarded as too primal to be incantations. Doesn't that hint at them being ancient? And that's not really any dragon imagery at Hornsent settlements. So now that we also get the confirmation that dragon communion was performed against Baal's progeny, that would also align them more strongly with Fair Missoula. So I guess a lot of this stuff, at least this direction, is starting to fit together a lot more nicely than I would have guessed.
Purity is thus expunged. One calls it cleansing. This is why the victims of Messmer are not only left as spirits, but as blackened spirits, burnt in soul as well as body. It would seem that Neil managed to spare the complete burning of the Banished Knight souls through his bartering. The Shadow View, once a place of importance worth naming despite its small size, became a reminder of the breakdown of Messmer's alliance. The doors leading to the lift down were locked, never to open again. And Gaius, a commander of Messmer's army, was stationed to guard the area. It's definitely interesting that the lifts leading down to the hidden exit were made by the Banished Knight faction, not Messmer, and feature the spiral's sigil.
So despite that, I still have some reservations of conflating these with the Banished Knights, and I'll get into that more in a little bit, I'm sure.
In time, the Scadutree splintered, and its fragments were strewn across the land. The shadow covered the realm, falling most heavily on the Shadow Keep. Black iron ornamented with gold. A rotten odour stubbornly clings to it. Perhaps it arises from the tainted nature of the blood that splattered upon it. Or perhaps it is the wearer's own blackened soul, festering after endless slaughter. I think the castle may not have always been such a deep black, and it was the falling Scadutree flakes that made all the buildings appear so similar, despite the distinct styles.
Yeah, it does kind of look more scorched, at least on the outside, but I don't know how well that tracks for the inside. And, yeah.
Areas of the keep not exposed to the staining fall show a wider spectrum of colour and texture.
Yeah, the inside of the storeroom is fair, as well as the church.
But the outdoor finish has over time been painted with the black of the Scadutree. Okay, let's finally return to our mystery tower.
Alright, so now let's turn to our mystery sigil. Let's go back here. It was like around here.
And
let's just try that.
Stationed to guard the area down to the hidden exit were made by the Banished Knight faction, not...
Alright, so this sigil does appear in a couple other places, like Castle Ensis, and we also get the Messmer dual crest in the banners in Castle Ensis as well. I almost thought Hawkshaw was going to talk about it with the oddly twisting design of the inner Shadow Keep, and I thought he was making a lot of brilliant observations about the wooden structures being added later. But guys, do we know of another academic institution that has oddly twisting interior portions. That's right. The grand... No, I was joking. We do have the Carian study hall, which has similar style effects going on. So obviously this place doesn't turn upside down or anything like that. But why would I bring up the Carians with this crest? I think this might be the braid that Renala gave to R'hllana, and that might signify her gifting R'hllana to the Erdtree, the house of the Erdtree, essentially. So this could be the common thread, and if R'hllana is an academic, because, you know, she's a big brain nerd-ass sorcerer. Huh. Anyway, that could help explain a lot of these kind of Carian-esque updates, as well as the academic rigor applied later on in Messmer's reign, perhaps. So hopefully that idea makes sense. And that isn't to say that the Banished Knight idea doesn't fully pan out, but I also think a lot of this design on the woodwork and even on the outside of the building is more affiliated with like Raya Lucaria and whatnot than anything else. You think you agree with this, but you want to see their children? Well, the thing is, the moon could provide no succor to Messmer and his flame, so they ain't got no kids. You still find it weird that the upside down thing only happened once in this massive game? Well, some people do think that there is supposed to have been an upside down connection between like the Nox aqueducts and everything. And I do think there is a bit of a visual similarity between the Nox upside down looking aqueducts and parts of the not Shadow Keep, but the Anira Limbs spiral tower. So yeah.
Not Messmer, and feature the outdoor finish has over time been painted with the black of the Scadutree.
Oh, so he thinks that the braid could also symbolize fire and moon. That's interesting. Too bad it's not like a twin moon, though, for R'hllana.
Okay, let's finally return to our mystery tower. Where does all this leave us? Taking everything we've looked at into account, we think the tower once served as a triumphal arch, or rather an honorary arch, for it was not to celebrate a military victory, but instead the rise of the Erdtree and its positive influence across the land. Its design once encouraged the population to walk beneath it when seeking blessings, something that was once very common. The Age of Plenty. And this was even carried out by Marika for a time, depicted by the Erdtree Favor's talisman. Often, actual Roman triumphal arches were initially built in wood and other rather temporary materials, only later to be replaced by one in stone. Something that may even provide further links to the Messmer alliance, given the focus on woodwork within the specimen storehouse, particularly in the rafters which feature the circular spiral design. This is why the tower and the Shadow Keep could be built so close.
Oh yeah, I also forgot to say we see that braided design appear on the chairs in Castle Ensis, which I don't think I have a picture for, and if I do, it's certainly not labeled, so I can't like find it very quickly. So anyway, that is also partly why I do think the connection is stronger with R'hllana than the Banished Knights more specifically.
Part of its purpose was to illustrate the good terms between each faction. I think this is why the tower features the unique flame stonework at the base. It serves as a symbol of the union with Messmer, for on the spears of Messmer found throughout the realm, that feature his heraldic crest at the top, are found the same flame styling. This might be why the only other place they are found is surrounding the public depiction of Marika in the keep, the ultimate symbol of the Erdtree who Messmer serves. The rise of the Erdtree and its bounty shared across the land was symbolized by the framing of its falling sap. The Lord accepted the sap stoically, without any signs of wavering. No Underlord of the Erdtree casts a long shadow over the lands. The building's height ensured it was seen by as many eyes as possible, but this was all it was for. And so, after the Age of Plenty passed, and after Marika and Messmer betrayed the Horn Scent, the tower no longer served any purpose. The fact that the tower was included in the Veiling of the Realm further illustrates this. The tower's once kind message slowly faded from memory. until there remained no reference to it at all. Now there are no more blessings, and instead the people of the Erdtree collect the splinters of the Scadutree and use them in prayer.
Alright, so with that being said, I do want to turn back to the concept of impalement as far as heraldry is concerned, and why I still think that this relates to R'hllana more specifically. I did talk about this in my short video about R'hllana's twin blades. There's something in that description, and hold on, let me just pull it up. And Moonrathil's Night Sword, which makes it sound as though R'hllana was actually the bride of Messmer. So R'hllana's twin blades does have a bit of a discrepancy where it says in English, 2 swords as a single armament. When two-handing, a straight sword engraved with golden flame will be carried in the left hand. Here and here alone were moon and fire ever together. So this is quite a big departure. So this final line here corresponds with the final line of the Japanese. But it, rather than saying here and here alone or moon and fire ever together, it says that essentially within the blades, moon and fire were always together. So that's quite a huge departure. And I wondered if this was just a case of the script being updated in the Japanese and the English just not keeping up. I guess I should try to double check like the Korean or something. But anyway, Moonrathil. So, Moonrathil was the Twin Knights' chamberlain. She was also a friend of the trolls who served the royal family and proudly wielded their weapons as she fought arm in arm with her gargantuan comrades. The issue is, the term used for chamberlain isn't entirely like off base. It kind of can mean attendant in the sense of like a lady in waiting, I guess. Somebody who goes with a noblewoman and serves her for life, even if she were to change family after being married. That can be the implication. And in a more modern sense, this term can be used to describe a bridesmaid. So I think the localizers were taking the former interpretation, like the attendant, and running with that rather than bridesmaid. So if R'hllana was Messmer's bride, well, if Moonrathil was R'hllana's bridesmaid, that means R'hllana got married. Whom did she get married to? Most likely Messmer because of the swords and whatnot. And then going back to impalements, like I started this off with, in heraldry, impalement shows like one's affiliations, which Hawkshaw covered briefly, but he didn't go into as much detail about, or maybe he did and maybe I just forgot, that the male's crest is shown on the dexter, the right-hand side of the sigil, and the wife's crest is shown on the sinister or left-hand side, which coincides with the crest of Marika, or not Marika, but Messmer's flame on the right-hand side as it's facing us. Well, the right-hand side, like, of the crest as it faces us, versus the left-hand side of the wife's family. So if R'hllana was married to Messmer, then it would make sense that her sigil would be on this half. And then we do see that sigil appear in like Castle Ensis. So there's just a lot of small details, which leads me to that conclusion. So let me catch back up with you guys in the chat. Yeah, I also thought for a while that the circle was potentially Marika's braid, but now over time, I think it's Renala's braid that she gifted R'hllana. And then Wayne Kelly says, you think the veiling and the end of the Age of Abundance are tied together? That is what I'm thinking too. It seems like the chalice is the place where all the blessings were done. There's a lot of Scadutree sap. It's congealed and immobile. Or like forever together, yeah. Yeah, they're definitely trying to convey some kind of romance. And so the way that I read the English, I was like, oh, so the moon and fire were never together except in the blades, means that if they were only together in the blades, then they were not together with the owners. And to me, my initial impressions were that Rolana may have had an unrequited love for Messmer, which was a little bit tragic. And I kind of enjoyed that dichotomy, but it's a little bit strange that she's kind of removed from Messmer, but maybe not, because she's essentially the sword of Messmer and doing his bidding with all of the impaling. Oh, you posted the chair in Ensis on the Discord? Okay, sweet. Yes, so that is exactly what I was talking about. So let's go ahead and pull that up. So yeah, I think this also appears in the Shadowkeep as well. So it's just kind of interesting that it's in both locations. So honestly, I don't take this crazily seriously, and I put the other stuff in a more prominent position with the bridesmaid comment than this specifically. So just keep that in mind. And you think it was some kind of arranged marriage that explained the unrequited love there? So that the thing is, the unrequited part isn't really in the Japanese, and it's just kind of more of a relic of the English. So it could go either way, I guess. All right, let's go ahead and finish out the video.
If you made it this far, consider supporting the channel and get early access to upcoming releases, feature your own theories on the channel, or even get access to new Lore Before Bed videos ad-free for less than $1. Your support makes content like this possible, so thank you.
Alright, let's go ahead and give this video a solid thumbs up. So I'm going to go ahead and link it into the chat for you guys if you want to give Hawkshaw some support here. I'm actually going to go ahead and leave a comment as well. Hey, I really enjoyed the video. Solid observations about the updates given to the interior of the storeroom. On the subject of the braided sigil crest in Messmer's sigil, I think it's supposed to be the braid that Renala gifted Rolana, and that Rolana was wed to Messmer. What else was I going to say about that? It appears in places like Castle Ensis, and as you pointed out about the Shadowkeep, I think its renovations more closely resemble the interior design of academic institutions like the, I need to retype that, Karian Study Hall, and it would help support a later change to the ethos of the crusade. What else am I doing? There's some more concrete evidence for this in the Japanese, where Moonrithil's sword mentions she could have been the bridesmaid of Rolana, and Rolana's twin blades don't really make it sound like her love was unrequited in JP. Nonetheless, I still do think there are many connections between the Banished Knights and Sarash's Banished Knights and the horn sent through Sarash. And we do know the BKs supported Godfrey, and then later on, and then Morgott later on. Okay. Good enough, I suppose. And then Cohiba said the Erdtree forces defeating the Banished Knights could explain why the ancient dragons eventually invaded Lanedell. Well, the thing is... Well, hold on, let me think about this. That could explain it in a post-Godfrey era sense, I guess, if they were defeated after that point. A lot of my questions come up into, like, when do things happen on the timeline? Like, when does Godfrey gain control of the Banished Knights? Then why are so many dead in the Shadowkeep but only in the Gaius arena? Is it because he was opposed? Or was it truly a betrayal? Because they've been banished now. Man, this really sucks trying to reconcile Marika's divinity with Placidusax's fled god and everything. And the Erdtree. Because I'm doing some real Pepe Sylvia stuff right now with, like, what if Marika really was Placidusax's god, but Placidusax wasn't really the Elden Lord, and he was just serving in that capacity somehow. Yeah, this just kind of sucks. It feels like every time I'm onto something, there's just something else which is like, but this. And so it's like, damn it. How do you explain that? Anyway, I feel like I am getting closer, and watching these videos tonight definitely helped cement a lot more of my thoughts about the story trailer taking place much later than it seems to imply. You don't get the impression that the Banished Knights have much room in Marika's kingdom? Not so much anymore, but I mean, they're still kind of around, which is the weird thing. And then he says, it's totally crackpot, but if you imagine Godfrey switching allegiances from Sunrealm to Marika, it could say something about Radahn suddenly deciding to be Miquella's lord. I don't think he decided that because he needed to die. It's an interesting way to side with somebody when it doesn't really matter, when you don't have much choice in the matter. Anyway, that'll be it for tonight's stream, everybody. I don't think I mentioned it earlier in the stream, or if I did, it was only in passing to Errant Vice. But tomorrow I will not be checking out lore, but instead I will be checking out a game called Signalis, which I know virtually nothing about. It's supposed to be like an indie survival horror game. I am typically really not into survival horror by any stretch of the imagination, so I don't know how much I'm going to enjoy it, but Errant Vice was gracious enough to donate $100 to the channel, and as my way of like kind of thanking somebody for being that gracious, I want to just like do something nice for them, and so I will stream a game of their choice for that much. Now that doesn't necessarily mean I'll do the full playthrough, because on my like rules thing I'll do it like at least 3 hours, so who knows, if I do enjoy the game maybe I'll play it longer, but my plans are kind of up in the air, so yeah, that's just kind of what's on the docket for tomorrow. So if you want to join me for that, you're more than welcome. And if you don't, I totally understand. And hopefully we'll catch you on the next one. I'll make like a community post and a Discord post of when the lore will be back. But just assume for now that it'll be the day after that. So it essentially most likely be Tuesday, American time, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, potentially for more lore stuff. So hopefully we'll catch you on the next one or the one after that. And so until then, take care, stay safe. Last Protagonist out.